It is going to have to settle down at some point. That's all there is to it. It will have to settle down. We will have to get to a landing spot in college football. But for right now, we're not even close. It doesn't appear. It doesn't appear. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, Saturday afternoon, which have typically been bright and sunny and nice and warm and just beautiful, at least where I'm located. Maybe a little bit too hot, maybe triple digits where you are, but enjoy the air conditioning that I hope you are able to enjoy, or just find a cool spot in general and welcome into the Voice of College Football. And we will discuss the game we all love each and every day with you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. We posted a channel update, a network update. I've got to correct myself in that verbiage of sorts, because we have individual channels that would total 15 channels. But you add them all together, we got a network here at the Voice of College Football. So it was a network update. Please check it out. That will keep you in tune with everything that we've got going here at the Voice of College Football, heading into the 2023 college football season. Much to talk about. And certainly, again, we want you to be able to find your favorite programs, your favorite shows, your favorite channels, your favorite content. And we want to talk ACC and Stanford Cal, and the possibility that is extremely close. It's not being approved at this point, but extremely close in having a true coast to coast across the nation. The Big Ten has achieved this from coast to coast, but there's a lot of states skipped in the middle, and the Big Ten has pretty much pieced it together all the way across the board. But we would have two satellite schools and football teams in Stanford and Cal joining the ACC. We will discuss the pros and cons, the pluses and minuses, positives and negatives for both Stanford and Cal and the ACC. Also, we're going to talk some Big 12 football. Of course, they have made their additions for 2024, and I have provided a outlook at what I think should be done with the structuring of the conference, the schedule, in the championship format. I should have been a little bit more detailed, and I'll clarify that in a few minutes as well. But we want to go straight to the phone lines. We do have a guest coming on at 3:30 Eastern time to talk some Utah football and talk about Utah's fit in the Big 12. Fit meaning maybe at the very top of the Big 12 is what Utah is going to be if it continues its current trends. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got the real MVP on the line. Look at this.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this Saturday afternoon?
I'm doing extremely well. What's going on?
Well, I wanted to talk about some college football realignment. I saw Dennis Dodd reported like a week ago that San Diego State was trying to lead a coup against the Mountain West. Now, J.D. Wicker, the athletic director, San Diego State, denied that report. And normally I would believe an athletic director because he runs the program. But the last athletic director to go against Dennis Dodd was Mike Harlan, the athletic director of Utah, and he was completely wrong. So what do you think about the possibility of San Diego State trying to lead a coup against the Mountain West and failing, apparently?
And Harlan was either wrong or he just wasn't being forthright.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. San Diego State. I have not seen that article, not heard that rumor. So what would be the nature of this coup? They lead a coup against the Mountain West. And what is their mission or purpose that they would like to have this result in?
Ideally, they want to go to a Power 5. I believe they wanted to kick out like Hawaii, Nevada, and somebody else and replace them with Oregon State, Washington State, and Stanford, basically.
Okay. So they're not okay. So they want to kind of force the hand at the Mountain West.
Yes, I believe so. I'm trying to find the article as we speak.
They're not necessarily taking over the Mountain West. I don't know that a coup would be the proper term, but regardless. Okay, got it. So they want the Mountain West to elevate, and they believe that could be accomplished by adding 3 marginal football brands and kicking out 3 awful football brands. Well, I don't know where they would go to determine how that would be received by the College Football Playoff Committee and everybody involved that would be in power in place to give them that elevation. I don't know. There is no chain of command per se. The College Football Playoff Selection Committee kind of operates on its own island and just selects who's in the playoffs. Now they've got to go by the criteria. So in terms of who would deem them worthy of Power 5 status, that is one of the great mysteries and one of the great issues in college football is we've got no uniformity or no one ruling the sport, unless with the playoff, there's just an agreement between the conferences that we've selected this committee. We're good with them and they're going to select the teams and then we're going to go play.
Correct.
And these power conferences have been around for so long that there was nobody in position, nor was there any reason to challenge what a Power 5 was. And there is as Tony Altamore has explained to us, there is a legality to it in terms of the autonomous 5. But in terms of what we're all accustomed to, the Power 5, that's without question from a football standpoint. So for somebody to challenge that, I don't know who they're challenging exactly.
I'm not exactly sure either. It's all a mess. I think we can at least agree with that at the very minimum. Now, for the Pac...
Well, as you as a football fan, would you consider that to be a power conference if those changes were made? No. They're not even as good as the American Conference was before they lost Cincinnati, Utah, or UCF and Houston.
Right. Now, I saw the Oregon State president release a statement basically saying their goal is to try to rebuild the Pac-4. How would you rebuild the Pac-4? I don't even know how it's possible to make it a conference in general because the Mountain West exit fees are so ridiculous and any other school you get is so far away from you that it seems unfeasible to me.
Yes, I saw that statement. I really don't know how that would be achieved. Like you, if you're looking at geography, you're looking straight at the Mountain West, and San Diego State didn't want to pay $34 million. And because of, somebody would certainly scarf over $34 million to join the Big Ten or the SEC, but they're going to make up the money to join a football conference that may or may not be viable, may or may not be able to get a decent media rights deal. That would be a huge, huge risk taken by those schools that seem to have up to this point been content with their place in college football to play in the Mountain West Conference, play a lot of games on ESPN2 and FS1 and make a little bit of money and represent their institutions with a football program that is the most high profile portion of the school. But to take that risk, and man, it would have to be planned out elaborately. And there would have to be a lot of schools that would have to cooperate and get on board. They couldn't pick them off one by one because all of them would say, no, we're not going. It's too risky. But if they could get some kind of consortium together, that 6 or 8 would agree. I don't know why the Mountain West schools would need to leave the Mountain West other than just to say the name brand of the Pac-12 is a more well-known name brand than what we have. I laid it out this way a few weeks ago when there was still a Pac conference of sorts that it's looked like for the long time since the Pac has been vulnerable that they would pick apart the Mountain West, Fresno State, San Diego State, et cetera, anybody valuable to them and add them to the Pac to supplement their losses. And then it got to a point where they lost so many schools where could this just be a merge between the Pac and the Mountain West? And now we're at a point where I would think that the Mountain West would have the leverage, except for the name brand, to say, we're not joining you. You will have to join us.
I agree with that 100% because I don't know how financially the Pac-4 is able to afford a $34 million fee per school. Yes. I mean, if you get 8 schools, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, they can't even get a contract, a media rights deal that's anywhere close. When they were at full strength, they couldn't get a media rights deal that close. You know, the reports came out, I'm sure you saw the other day, and I have yet to read the entire article. I'm sure it's a really good one because everything The Athletic puts together is quality. But there's an article on The Athletic about the full collapse of the Pac-12 and how it and I'm sure there's some nuggets in there that I wasn't aware of, so I wanted to look at that. But you know, the reports have come out recently that ESPN said flat out, hey, yeah, we'll take everything in the Pac-12. Here's your $30 million per school. And the Pac-12 said, nope. You know, they could have saved their conference. There you go. They would have not only had the money to be viable, they couldn't compete with the Big Ten and the SEC, but they could have competed with that amount of money with Big 12 and ACC money. And more than that, they would have had the security of an ESPN contract where everybody could find them and they could build off of our home's ESPN. You can find us there. And I don't know what ESPN was planning on doing with the rest of the games. You know, they're, of course, not going to show Pac-12 games all day, but I guess in their myriad of networks, they would have found a home for everything somewhere. But they said no.
Right. Well, they wanted $500 million per year, which...
Yeah, they wanted 50 million, yes, total. Yeah, or 50 million per school. Yes.
Yeah. Makes absolutely no sense to me. Literally 0 cents. But
yes, the current contract, I got the numbers right here. The current contract before the Big Ten and the SEC really explode is right now the Big Ten's making 58 million and the Big Ten 58 million, the SEC is at 50 million, and the Pac-12 seemed to think that they were worth 50 million.
Right, and that's what makes no sense to me. And that's just without USC and UCLA. Yeah. If they had USC and UCLA, I can understand it. But without those two prestigious brands, who they got, Oregon and Washington, and a whole bunch of, irrelevant teams, in my opinion. Just teams nobody in general cares about. So the final thing I'll ask you about, Mark, is the ACC, for whatever reason, wants to completely disregard their own name and go to the Pacific Coast, apparently. They had a vote reportedly to add Stanford and Cal that got denied by 1 vote.
Yes.
And the 4 schools that denied them were Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and North Carolina State. What do you think about, first off, adding Stanford and Cal, and what do you think about the 4 schools that denied them?
Yeah, that vote was the main reason why I started up this live stream, because I wanted to address that. So yes, I wanted to really run through and without giving it a whole lot of thought. So these are right off the top of my head. Stanford, Cal to the ACC, and you know what works, what doesn't work. So as you bring it up, 12 out of 15 is needed, and they're only 1 vote away. And we've got Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina State, as you stated, and it should be no surprise to anyone that certainly 3 of those 4 schools would vote no. Because here's the deal. Of course, if Stanford and Cal join the league, the other schools are voting yes because they want to fortify and stabilize the ACC conference. So if you're Syracuse, Boston College, heck yeah, bring on, let's do and replicate what the Big 12 did. Let's try to grab viable schools that play football and safeguard our league for losses. So it makes sense for all the have-nots in the ACC to want to add so that they can solidify their league. This is going to be one of the issues that Florida State in particular and Clemson face in trying to break off from the ACC, is that they don't have enough members to go with them that are valuable enough to know that they have a landing spot. They can leave confidently. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, they can all leave confidently saying, okay, we know that we're valuable enough. Somebody wants us. Multiple conferences may want us. Versus if you're Boston College or Syracuse, you want to be part of the ACC forever, because if this completely implodes, then they're going to be a group of 5 conference. They're going to either be a group of 5 conference themselves, or they're going to splinter off and go to Conference USA, and mostly the American Conference, I would think, is the best of the group of 5. So that's why that vote stands the way it does. Those are the schools that know that they've got sports value, football value.
Right. And can I just say, why does Notre Dame have a vote in this whole process?
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It's pathetic. I'm sorry, ACC, but it's a weak move.
Yes, this just slapped me in the face again the other day in reading all this, and that Notre Dame has a full vote, just like any other member school, even though they refuse to play football in the conference, the most important sport, that the ACC is weak enough to say, yes, we'll not only let you abuse our league, just we've got to carry you through all the non-revenue sports, and then you're going to abuse us in football, win most of the games, but not play in our league. And then we're going to give you a vote to determine what the course and the direction of our league is going to be in your hands as much as any other member in the league. It's ridiculous.
Agreed. And the final thing I'll say about the Stanford and Cal is Stanford's main draw in terms of athletics isn't their football or basketball, but it's all the non-revenue sports. How much of them would they have to cut just because of travel costs? I feel like you would be taking away their key ability.
So this is a great point that you bring up, and I don't really know how to navigate this exactly, because from a financial standpoint, you can add up all these other sports that aren't football, men's basketball, and in some locations, women's basketball, and in some varied locations, baseball, but basically men's and basketball and football, that if all you're thinking about is financially, if you gain no other value in it besides just what is the bottom line, then they're worthless. And I know that offends some people, but I don't mean that. I mean, those athletes are incredible. They're valuable. The sports are valuable to the university for a lot of different reasons. But if all you're talking about is, does the sport make money? No, they don't. They all lose money. So from that standpoint, it doesn't make sense to add Stanford. But and I think that there is some value financially to it. It's just not directly to having a national championship swimming team, a national championship tennis team. Stanford has won the Directors Cup, which measures the success of all sports. They've won it like 26 of 29 years. They're the best. Listen, everybody that doesn't follow anything else, like myself, doesn't follow anything else. Stanford, if you want to measure it across all sports, is the most successful sports program in the country. If you're just talking about winning championships, they've got the most championships every year. But none of them make any money. So that's, and then you've got the whole academic part of this. So, and this is where, again, I don't have the answer, and I truly don't believe anybody has the answer, because every school and conference operates somewhat differently. That we know Stanford has more money than any school. The endowment is just dwarfs everybody else. They've got so much money. Well, if you're operating this like a business, let's say in such a way that none of this money crosses lines, well, again, athletically and football wise, that doesn't do anybody any good in the ACC. But if there is sharing of funds, then you would want to have Stanford join the ACC. And then you also have the component of, and we see this most in the Big Ten, where the schools are the most connected. Their libraries, their research, shoot all the way down to having the same car rental agreement among the entire conference, which seems kind of frivolous or silly or whatever, but it makes a whole lot of sense. Think of all the cars that need to be rented by all the academic institutions in the Big Ten. Well, they got a rental agreement that saves them tens of millions and millions and millions of dollars every year, because they got to deal with a particular company. Well, those kind of things can help offset the athletic financial burden when you save a ton of money, and then you add on to that the prestige of Stanford and all the benefits to adding a school like that. And I'm leaving out Cal. Now, Stanford's a slight step above, but Cal's in that same range of great academic institutions. But Cal hasn't been the sports program that Stanford is, and has not been the football program that Stanford's been at its peak. So Cal is a low-grade Stanford in a certain extent. And we know that the ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips, he cares about academic institutions just like the Big Ten does. And we know that North Carolina cares, Duke cares, and there's some really good schools that I would think would want to be affiliated with Stanford and with Cal.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, but after this latest shuffle of conference realignment, I mean, it feels like Stanford and Cal's been holding the bag. Like, I thought the Big Ten would get them if they wanted them this go around.
I did too.
But at some point, I would think it leans more towards athletics, because if the first go around you weren't chosen and the second go around you weren't chosen, I mean, that leads me to believe athletics matter slightly more than academics.
I agree. And when you say athletics, football.
Yes, and partially basketball.
Yes, and partially basketball. But again, not knowing the nuts and bolts of everything I just stated. So basically, I just gave a surface level knowledge of things that are considered and factored and where they stand, but without knowing exactly how all those things would work. My take would be that the ACC should add those two. I would add them. And this is how I work out the travel. Now, this is not any kind of perfect plan, but this is how I would work out the travel, is that I would, in terms of track and field, Stanford take on, all the various track and field events at San Jose State and UC Santa Barbara and wherever else on the West Coast. And then you can meet us for the ACC championship, and we'll hold the event together, and Stanford and Cal can come out for that. I just think that the non-revenue sports can be worked out in such a way that you have a limited conference schedule. And I don't know exactly how to work that out, but I just think that you would just play most of your games in the region and not be flying across the country to play everybody in the ACC all the time. Now, I know you're about to talk every time I take a breath, but the best way would have been when the PAC was still, when we first heard of this, the ACC and the PAC getting together, and the PAC was still a semblance of a conference. That's when they should have gotten together, when they still had somewhat equal numbers of schools on both coasts. And it could have been a deal where you're almost playing the AFC and the NFC, or the National League and the American League, and you're playing almost all the time. You make a few trips, and then you just meet for a championship in the non-revenue sports. But they can't do that now because there's only 2 of them. Well, there's 4 of them if the ACC has any interest in Oregon State and Washington State. But much like what you're saying with these 3 rounds going through with no interest, or at least no yes vote on Stanford and Cal going to another conference, seems that way with the ACC looking at Wazoo and Oregon State. They want to look at Stanford and Cal seriously first, and who knows what the other 2, what kind of chance they have of latching on to the ACC.
Yeah, totally agree. I think, from what I understand, what the Big 12 does is, like, for swimming, they just do it regionally, and then they'll host a swim meet or something like that. That's basically what you're describing.
Absolutely. And, we're very football minded, but let's understand that, for example, the Big Ten is a different conference in different sports. It's a different hockey conference. It's got a few schools that are in the region that are hockey schools, and they play hockey, but they don't play other sports in the Big Ten. And this happens in other sports as well.
Yeah, I believe the Big Ten has Johns Hopkins University for lacrosse.
That's it.
So
yeah, in lacrosse. Yep.
That's all I got for you, Mark. Fight on to Tim, Tony, and Rick. And thank you for the update on your channel, Mark.
Appreciate it, DeReal. Thank you. Have a good day. DeReal MVP getting us kicked off. Now we got our special guest coming in. We hope that Philip is still around. There he is. We want to check in on some Utah football. So the theme of the day, folks, has been realignment, of course, and we led off with this whole ACC vote on Cal and Stanford. And, of course, we want to talk about the Big 12. And even though things have settled down, of course, I'm intrigued by these additions and how they will potentially fit. So we're happy to be joined by Philip. You can join him on the Wild Ute and right here on YouTube, the Holy Rivals. Philip, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Mark?
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, sure. So Big ideas here with Utah football. Do you want to go through the roster breakdown, or do you want to break out some realignment thoughts?
Well, we know everybody's here for realignment, but I do want to talk football. We will talk football. We're going to shove football down people's throats because while everybody's focused on 2024 and realignment, and I know it's interesting and the saga continues, we're going to be playing football here in a few weeks with Utah and an opponent that they may want to beat here in week one, that they may be focused on. So we'll get to that in just a second. But since we're on the realignment deal, this is my first thought, is that Utah, as it stands right now, is the best football program in the Big 12.
I totally agree with that. And, it was hard for Ute fans at first to accept, going over to the Big 12 because they saw it as more of a lateral move, and the heart was really going into the Big 10. So a lot of Ute fans see it that way. But really, the more, though, a lot of fans have considered this, it's a big win for the Utes to be in the Big 12. I mean, you've got the Texas-Florida recruiting grounds. Really, nothing much has changed as far as like your play. The talent on Big 12 rosters is actually, if you look at like blue chip talent, it's slightly lower in the Big 12 than it's been in the Pac-12 too. So Utah's program's ripping and roaring. Coaching staff's going to stay around for a couple more years, hopefully. And this thing's just going to keep rolling on. I think the Utes are going to be one of the powers of the Big 12 conference, definitely top three, and going in next year, competing for that Big 12 championship.
When you say top three, do you have a number in mind, or you're just basically saying they'll be in that range? You don't want to say, well, we're number one, definitely nobody's close to us. We're in that top three range, or do you have other schools in mind?
I think that it's generally the top three range I'm thinking of. I think TCU is going to be up there too, just given like the talent on the roster. K-State's always competitive. So I'm just kind of throwing out like a ballpark idea. Sure. Here's what's going on in Utah land though. Okay. So there's some quarterback issues on the roster right now. And Cam Rising's graduating after the season regardless. So we're going to have a new quarterback that we haven't had a lot of experience with starting at Big 12 play. And if Cam Rising happened to be going into the Big 12 next year, if he wasn't graduating, Utah would be the number one team and favorite to win it next year. But there's some uncertainty at quarterback in 2024, and with real recent news that in Utah land in this year too, actually, with the quarterback situation.
Okay, we're going to get to that, Philip, and certainly I got a number of questions concerning how good this team will be in 2023. But just to close us off on the realignment part of this, how do you think, or will it, the move to the Big 12, impact recruiting and the strategy there?
I think that the move to the Big 12, it will help Utah's recruiting, but I think it's going to be a marginal help. I don't think it's going to go off the charts or anything. Just to give everyone some perspective on the Utes roster right now, there are 20 four-star players, like 24/7 composite players right now. So you're looking in that range. I don't think that changes much. Maybe goes up a few, maybe goes down a few. I'm thinking goes up because of the Texas ties, but I don't see it really changing. Utah recruits hard at Texas, recruited hard out of Texas in the Mountain West days. And California is still going to be a pipeline for the Utes, although we have no California teams and connections necessarily in the Big 12 there. We're still going to hit that hard. But really, I think that Texas pipeline is going to open up. We'll get more players out of there. Plus, the state of Utah keeps getting better at college football, too, and you take care of your own state. So I think recruiting marginally improves.
We get Philip here from the Wild Ute. Join him on Twitter. You will see the banner back up here in just a second. It's the Wild Ute. And again, his channel with the Big 12 Mafia, the Holy Rivals. You can catch it right here on YouTube. And as I mentioned to you the other day, Philip, I only learned here in the last, I've been watching BYU and Utah since I've been a college football fan forever and knew it was a rivalry. It's a really good rivalry. They're good teams, but didn't realize the angst and the hate. And I guess I'm kind of filling in for the BYU side against you right now. I didn't realize that, but didn't realize the
angst. New shirt. Come on, Mark.
in the hate. Sorry that I had to play this role here, inviting you on. Little did I know. But we do have a Utah helmet and no BYU helmet, if that makes you feel better. And we put the Utes right there on the top for you. But just in regards to, you know what? I want to take it in that direction real quick. For those who don't know, can you give us some narrative storylines, stories from the past that would crystallize the the hatred, I'll put it in sports quotes, between the two?
So I've lived in Utah for 25 years, so I know this rivalry well. Some of my best friends are BYU grads, fans, and they're what makes this rivalry really strange, kind of weird, quirky, is the religious element. There's the LDS Church that's affiliated with BYU, and then also University of Utah. Believe this or not, actually, Brigham Young founded the University of Utah before BYU.
I didn't know that.
So there's all type of religious ties, but okay, so my perspective is a little bit different because I'm non-LDS in the state of Utah. So growing up, I was never a big fan of BYU because I was not LDS, and so there was a lot of tension, you could say, and animosity between the two programs because a lot of non-LDS kids actually go to the University of Utah, and a lot of out-of-state kids go to the University of Utah. And so there's that natural built-in tension, and plus like being in the conferences, the WAC conference for so long, the Mountain West, it's just a battle. I mean, every time you play the Cougars, it's going to be close. It's going to be nasty. I remember when I was a student at the University of Utah, those were the best games versus BYU. The juice was there. People were going crazy. You'd rush the field. I mean, I remember some students from the University of Utah rushing the field and getting in fights with the BYU players on the field. I mean, that's just how much hate there is. Like, it's just like swinging, right? Like, people go nuts during this rivalry, and there's a lot of juice there. And I think in the Big 12, especially if there's a pod system that's developed, and I'm just thinking like BYU and Utah in the future, if they're playing for like a pod championship or maybe a Big 12 championship for a playoff berth, Mark, holy smokes, there's never been that type of stakes in this game before. And I just know like the emotion and energy that goes into it when it's low stakes. I have no idea what's going to turn into. And I have no idea what Brett Yormark's going to do with it. It just seems like it's going to go just explode in popularity, local popularity. And I'm really excited for it.
Folks, if you checked out the video that I posted where I structured the Big 12, a few different proposals, the way I would do it, did the structure of the divisions / pods, did a few different formats, and then the scheduling in the championship game. The one mistake I made was not that I made a mistake in the way I had it structured. I did not clearly explain, as I have in restructuring other conferences, that I would believe in a flex protect schedule. So I had a lot of people and their angst come at me in splitting up BYU and Utah in separate pods. But you can protect, you flex protect the game. You can still play them every year. That's what you do right there. But speaking of which, do you have a format that you would like to see the Big 12 take on here? What would be your format, your scheduling approach?
Okay, so I'm making some assumptions here. Okay. I think I really see it in the future. I see the Big 12 expanding to 20 schools with 4 ACC schools. And once that happens, I think there will be 4 pods of 5 teams. So Colorado, Arizona's, Utah, BYU would be in one pod, Texas teams in another pod. Then you'd have an ACC pod with UCF. I really see it moving in that way. It might not happen in 2024, but in a couple of years, I see it in that direction. And I see a lot of opportunity because a pod champion can have like a mini playoff within the conference, right? Like you can just imagine like Yormark branding that, like you're a pod champion within the Big 12 and you've got 2 weeks of playoffs to see who's the champion, right? Like you're maximizing exposure, playoff berths. It just makes too much sense to me. And I see it moving that way. If the ACC doesn't disband though, I still see a pod system. Still seeing like 14 pod system. And that really sucks for like the East Coast schools and all the travel. But I don't really know how to make that work regardless because they're going to be traveling a lot anyway. So pods for me, 4-team or a 5-team, depending on how it all shakes out with the ACC.
Yeah, I put a pod together with the Arizona schools in Colorado and Utah. Then I put a pod together with all the Texas schools because there are 4 of them. You keep them in Texas. Then I've got a pod with Oklahoma State, the 2 Kansas schools, and BYU. And then you rope everyone else together, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it's generally an East Coast or Eastern time zone, UCF, West Virginia, Cincinnati. But you got to go over and grab Iowa State. So I don't know exactly how to work that out either. The numbers don't work. But your first proposal is with the ACC imploding.
Correct.
And so then I'm guessing that you think that a few of those top schools would get picked off by the SEC/Big Ten. Who do you think would be earmarked for the Big 12?
Pitt Panthers. I think that the NC State Wolfpack. I think those are two no-brainers, really, that kind of fit, that like to jump over, that probably going to get left out by the other two, the SEC and the Big Ten. And then it gets a little bit more questionable, but I think that Virginia Tech, if they're there, they don't get picked up by the SEC or the Big Ten, would be a great fit. And then the last one could be Georgia Tech. Or if somehow, some way, Miami or Florida, I don't think they're going to get left out. If they happen to, though, in some way, shape, or form, you add them as a no-brainer. But Georgia Tech might be a really good fit right there, too, with UCF to add somebody closer. So I'm thinking those four teams. But you can make the argument for Louisville or Duke as well.
And I would love that kind of old Big East independent feel of Cincinnati, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Pitt. You group them together, they can play. I don't know if it would work out with the rest of the conference. And once you throw the ceiling of a Pitt, Virginia Tech, Louisville, some of these schools, then I'm not going to say that this conference is nearly as good as the SEC and the Big Ten, but in good years, I think there could be cycling up of really good years in the Big 12 where they could hold their own.
I think that it's like a kind of a grungy, gritty conference with really good teams, like, like those kind of second brand teams, like Virginia Tech and Utah, real similar kind of schools in a lot of ways, like with an Oklahoma State. So you really are pretty competitive with that type of structure. I think that it makes plenty of sense, too, that the SEC and the Big Ten, they eat first. They're going to get their best teams, your UNCs, your Florida States, your Clemsons, going to be off the board. But the Big 12 will be that third in order to get teams, and they're going to be pieing to get there, too, I think.
Hey, Philip, before we get to the current Utah team, who is the team that you are most looking forward to Utah playing? Well, besides BYU, who is the team that you are most looking forward to playing in the Big 12?
You Texas Tech fans that gave Ute fans so much crap over the last 6 months to a year on Twitter and social media. They were just drilling Ute fans all the time. I want to beat those guys so bad, Mark. I want to go down there in Lubbock and just totally own the Red Raiders. So I don't know why I feel that way. I mean, just because there's no past history with Utah and Texas Tech, but there's something about Texas Tech that I just want to put it to that team so bad. So the Red Raiders, that's the team that I want to go after BYU.
Okay. Well, I think as you go down the hierarchy of the Big 12, while all this chaos has ensued, there's been a certain allegiance there from certain fan bases that have really taken offense to their conference kind of being downgraded and looked down on. And so the Texas Tech, they've been at the forefront of that. Absolutely.
And I think that it just seems like there's going to be some tension. I don't know why. I can't explain it. Just like that it thing, right? But Texas Tech and Utah, maybe just because like that dark colors with Texas Tech and Utah, some dark colors too. And
who's got the better black and red uniforms?
Right, but like they're kind of that gritty team, kind of like that bad boy team. And Utah's coming in here, and Utah's going to be the most hated team in the Big 12. Let's be honest. After all this debacle, like with Ute fans on Twitter and everything, battling back and forth. I just think that really anywhere where Utah goes, it's going to be a lot of venom, and Texas Tech especially. And so I think that there might be something there. But of course, BYU is going to be the rival. Always was, always will be. And playing the Cougars in conference is going to be a blast.
Folks, if you want to check out some really good Utah football talk, check out Philip at the Wild Ute. That's his Twitter handle, as you see there on the banner. The Holy Rivals is the YouTube channel. Check it out. All right, let's finally get to 2023. We got a Pac-12 back-to-back championship team. So could three-peat close down the conference? Wouldn't that be a stake in history right there to say, we closed this thing down 3 consecutive. Everybody thinks about the history of the Pac-12 and its USC and its other schools, but boom, it was Utah that shut the whole thing down with 3 consecutive titles. So as I have reviewed through the various magazines and so forth and prepped myself on Utah, and haven't done a great job yet, but Bryson Barnes, he's still on the roster, correct?
Yeah, he's still on the roster.
Nobody considers him for this backup quarterback position from what I read.
Mark, he might be the starter.
Okay. All
Florida.
right. That's
He
what I
might be
was
the starter
wondering.
of Florida here. We
Threw that
gotta
beautiful
talk about
pass in the Rose Bowl to give the Utah some hope there in a tie game late in the game. And I thought, Bryson Barnes, why do I keep hearing about Brandon Rose? So set up this quarterback situation for us.
Okay. So here we go. So Cam Rising, y'all, in the Rose Bowl last year, he tore his ACL. He's been rehabbing that. Kyle Whittingham says that he's 50-50 to go versus Florida. If he does play, he's not going to be 100%, though. He's going to be, 80%. Rising says that he's good to go. But there were some interviews this week with Rising that it kind of just felt like that might not be the case. So I'm not overly confident that Rising is actually going to play versus Florida. If I had to put a figure on it, I'd put about 49%, which is super concerning because of this next event that just happened. Check this out, everybody. Utah had a scrimmage yesterday, a scrimmage amongst its team. And Brandon Rose, the backup quarterback that was probably going to start versus Florida if Rising doesn't go, he took a big hit from a Ute defender, and he was hospitalized, and nobody knows exactly the extent of the injury, but they're saying that he's not going to be ready to play for months, possibly like a spleen injury, rib injury. So he's basically done for the season. Brandon Rose is basically done for the season. So you go down the pecking order, and all of a sudden you're looking at Bryson Barnes is probably sitting there at number 3 with a guy named Nate Johnson that's taken very few called snaps. He's a 4-star kid out of California, quick as lightning, explosive. But it's going to be, if Rising can't go, it's going to be Bryson Barnes or Nate Johnson starting versus Florida. And it's probably going to be Bryson Barnes this game one, I'm thinking too, if Rising can't go. And, I was thinking that the Utes were going to thump Florida by 10-plus points. If Bryson Barnes starts, it could be a tight game. I'm throwing that out there. Bryson Barnes knows the offense, but the guy was a no-star recruit. He had 0 stars, guys. He was a walk-on and a pig farmer, actually, in central Utah. And he came on, tried out for the team, eventually made the team, got a scholarship. But as far as talent-wise, he doesn't have much upside. And so the Utes have major quarterback issues right now that didn't seem as bleak a week ago, but now all of a sudden they do. Florida's going to be starting Graham Mertz, and there's been plenty of a lot of people bagging on that. But really, if it's Barnes versus Mertz, it could be closer than we thought in this football game.
Yeah. Again, if Bryson Barnes has any more throws in his arsenal, like he pulled off against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl with that one beautiful shot over, to the tight end, was that Kincaid or was that?
That's Kincaid. Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, wow, that's too bad because
how do you hit your own quarterback in a scrimmage and take him out for the season?
Yeah, that can't happen.
Florida. I don't get that. They even had those big helmets on, with like the extra cushions and stuff.
Can't happen.
Ooh, I don't get it.
Whoever
make it make sense.
Whoever is responsible for that, boy, he was running laps at least.
So that's the quarterback situation at Utah. So hoping and praying Rising's good to go, and 80% Rising's better than anything right now.
Well, Philip, this is unfortunate here. Well, obviously for you, it's unfortunate, but it's unfortunate here for us because I don't know how much SEC talk makes it back to you, but ever since Florida was able to pull off that game and Cam Rising made the mistake in the end zone last year, true ardent SEC followers have been able to hold that high as, we got this also ran Florida team that went 6-7. They beat the Pac-12 champs. So, we can beat anyone kind of thing. And so everyone's been looking forward to this rematch. And I would certainly like to see these teams at full strength.
Well, let's hope and cross our fingers that Rising's good to go, because if he plays, Utah should win this game by 7 or more points. But again, if Barnes is playing, given the talent level, Utah's probably still ekes it out, but it's going to be close. And I don't care what quarterback's playing for Florida. Just knowing Bryson Barnes, ability and talent level and everything. Great kid, amazing kid, but just winning big time football games, especially with a Florida team that's going to lose a lot of games this year. They're still SEC talented. They're still full of blue chip recruits, right? So it could be close. It could be close, and I hate that too. But I'm hoping that Rising is good.
Now, of course, the thought is always once there's a quarterback issue, okay, who are the running backs? Well, Tavian Thomas, of course, had an incredible year 2 years ago, still had a nice season last year. So 2 top rushers gone. Jaquindon Jackson is the leading rusher coming back. Anyone else factor into this?
So Micah Bernard is the second string running back, and he actually
Remember
played
that
for the
name?
Utes last year. And he actually went to the transfer portal, was considering transferring over to Colorado, came back to Utah. So really, the running back room is pretty similar to last year outside of Tavion Thomas. And Tavion wasn't even with the team in the second half of the season based on some mental health stuff. So really, it's the same quarterback or running back crew that we had late in the season. Jaquindon Jackson's an absolute star, guys. I'm telling you. Player to watch out for on the Utes roster is Jaquindon Jackson. He is a stud. He was a high 4-star kid out of Texas as a quarterback recruit. He's made the transition to a running back, and he is a beast. So this running back room for Utah is stacked with talent. It's deep. So Bernard's the second stringer. Then you got a guy in Jalen Glover. That's a third stringer. There's just so much depth, quality there. So it's going to be one of the strengths of the team.
Okay, of course, Dalton Kincaid gone. Brant. Now, I forget the pronunciation on his name like every off season, and then I'm reminded, then I forget. Keithy. So there is an E at the end. Yeah, Keithy. Couple nice pickups from Oregon and Indiana in Micah Pittman and Emery Simmons to catch the football if somebody can get it to him there in week 1.
Yeah, so the tight end room lost Dalton Kincaid, who, if you're an NFL fan, he is ripping it up in Bills camp right now. I mean, he's going to be an absolute stud in the NFL. He's a star for the Utes. But he was actually second string to Brant Keithy last year going into the season, going to the Florida game. Brant Keithy's all preseason Pac-12, a stud. The second stringer is Thomas Yasmin. I think that he made the second team, all Pac-12. So really, the Utes have kind of reloaded at the tight end position. It will be one of the strengths of the whole team, despite losing Dalton Kincaid. But these guys that are playing in the current roster are seniors. So, I mean, you're going into 2024 in the Big 12 season, tight end might be more of an issue. But tight end is going to be one of the strengths of the team as well. Wide receiver for the Utes has always been a question mark, though. It's that skill position, wide receiver and cornerback seem to be where Utah's always kind of lacked that top-end talent. This team has good talent, but probably not as good as, some of the other positions on the offense. You've got Pittman, as you mentioned, and Simmons are transfers in. They're going to have playing time to start. You've got Vele, who's a starting receiver, and then Money Parks, they're coming back too. So you've got some depth there, some 4-star talents coming in at that wide receiver position. But if I had to put a question mark at any position group on the team, it's going to be the quality and production of the wide receiver group.
We can go through the rest of the team here. I know that 3 starters back on the offensive line, 84 starts. Defensive line as well solidified with 7 of 8 of the top tacklers coming back, and Van Fillinger and Junior Tafuna, who was a freshman Pac-12 Player of the Year a couple of years ago. And so is this going to be the typically stout Utah offensive and defensive fronts?
Yeah, so Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator for the Utes, loves this offensive line. And frankly, backing up even more, Kyle Whittingham recently said this is the most talented Utah team he's ever had. Kyle Whittingham doesn't say that kind of stuff unless he means it. So, I mean, there is a lot of quality and depth on both the offensive and defensive line. There are 2 preseason Pac-12 players on the offensive line. A lot of experience, a lot of starting experience, a lot of depth there. The defensive line is going to be stout too. So really no concerns on the offensive defensive line. Utah will hold their own. The defensive ends, so the edge rushers last year were kind of an issue for the Utes. There were a lot of injuries, not a lot of pass rush. The guys are healthy. They're back. And in camp, really one of the big storylines is the pass rush. And judging by this Brandon Rose injury, I mean, I'm not doubting that actually at all. Gee,
just hit the other guys like that.
Still don't get it. I'll never get that. But yeah, so the edge rushers, the quality is a little higher this year. So the defensive, offensive line are going to be sound. Edge rushers will be improved, and one of the strengths of the team as well. When you bump it out, though, look at the cornerback. We lost Clark Phillips. The Utes lost Clark Phillips, who was just a stud, one of the greatest cornerbacks in Utah history. But we replaced him with a transfer in, Miles Battle from Ole Miss, from Mississippi. 6'4" kid, played in the SEC for a couple of years. So there is some returning talent at cornerback, but still historically, again, the wide receiver and cornerback side of things is giving the Utes kind of problems. So I think that the cornerbacks are good. There's not a ton of depth there, and that might be a concern if there's a lot of injuries on the cornerback side. And then you bump it out, actually looking at linebacker. Utah is bringing a lot of talent in. They've got a transfer coming in, Giovanni Lamuni, I believe that you say his last name. And he was one of the highest tacklers for Stanford last year. He came in, transferred into Utah. There's a lot of return talent. Linebacker will be a strength. And then you're looking in the secondary, in the safety room, some returning talent. We had a transfer out. So it seems like there's some good talent in the safety room, but not a ton of depth either. So the areas to look out for on this Utah team: wide receiver quality, and then the depth at cornerback and in the safety room. Everything else is really pretty solidified outside of the quarterback injury situation.
Philip's at the Wild Ute on Twitter. If you want to follow all of his tweets, check out Philip on Twitter. And also it's the Holy Rivals right here on YouTube. Philip, we appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to hit on before we move on?
Don't let your quarterbacks get hit in scrimmage. That's the big idea. Number two, the takeaway, y'all, is Kyle Whittingham said this is the most talented Utah team he's ever had. So if the quarterback situation, if Rising starts week 1 and he stays healthy, this is a special team. I don't care what who the opponent is. Utah's going to be in these games. They're going to win a lot of games if Rising's on the field. And don't be surprised if they're better than you anticipate, better than that 14 ranking in the coaches poll. I think Brett McMurphy rated the Utes 22. I'm just shaking my head. I'm shocked, because this team is actually more talented than last year's team. And if Rising is good to go, then we'll see what happens. Maybe special.
So, Philip, may be here to sway my preseason predictions. That could possibly be the case. I will say this, that I know the number from last year's AP preseason poll was that 13 of the 25 did not finish ranked. So I'm not going to put a whole lot. We could have been throwing darts at a map and come up with a better top 25 than the writers did. So we shall see. The AP poll comes out on Monday. The coaches poll, Utah at 14. Mm-hmm. Philip, appreciate the conversation. Great to have you back on.
Thanks, Mark. Take care, guys, and go Utes.
All right. Good to hear from Philip on the Wild Ute. Again, check him right there. And we will get back to the phone lines right here at the Voice of College Football as we talk about, first and foremost, Stanford, Cal to the ACC. Does it make sense for the conference? Does it make sense for Stanford and Cal? There are other options. Could be obviously going independent or to the Mountain West Conference. We sized it up a few minutes ago, but we will dig back in and we can talk anything college football. There are actually football games going to be played 2 weeks from today. Now, if I get on here in 2 weeks and most of the questions are about realignment with football going on, then we might want to question ourselves. If I get on here 3 weeks from today, week 1, and most people are talking about realignment, then we may really want to question ourselves in terms of why we love this sport. We've got Alex on the line here at the Voice of College Football. Alex, how you doing?
Mark, you don't get it. We're going to be talking realignment all season. It's never going to end.
We're going to.
This whole season is just realignment.
That was really not a question. It was more of just a confirmation of where people's heads are at.
Yeah, we obviously have our own preoccupation here, but every broadcast, every game will be, hey, this, whether it's happening on the field, but hey, look at next year and the schedule next year for this team and whatever.
If I could run out,
right.
Yeah, Alex, you bring up a great point. If I could run an alternate universe, I would run a channel, or if I didn't mind sabotaging this channel, or maybe it wouldn't, maybe it would blow up. Mm-hmm. I would like to test out the theory of just talking realignment the entire season and ignoring all games, not even mentioning who's winning games, what the conference championship races look, just not even mention a game. right in the middle of Saturday afternoon. Just talk realignment all the time.
Yeah, realignment, and then we're just waiting until the expanded playoff, and then the real fireworks start. So it's like this year is almost like we're sort of into this is sort of an interregnum and realignment despite the Pac-12 implosion, but it's still like uh we've kind of been looking ahead for a few years now for some things that we don't quite have. And so unless you're one of the top teams, unless you're Georgia or whoever, where you actually like to play the season and then it's your usual business, everybody else is kind of like, can we get to the next step?
Sad.
Yeah.
People embrace the 2023 college football season. Embrace it. Alex, what's on your mind?
There was a comment you just okay, so you just said Cal, Stanford, ACC doesn't make sense. No, of course it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. That's why it's going to happen.
Did I say it didn't make sense?
Well, no, I'm telling. Yeah,
I actually said without completely diving into it and having, of course, the metrics and everything that the people that will make the decisions have. I tend to think that the ACC should make this move.
Yeah, and I'm saying it's going to happen because we live in a universe, as you said, where we have a school in Seattle, Washington, and Eugene, Oregon, and schools in Los Angeles playing schools in Piscataway, New Jersey, State College, Columbus, Ohio, Indiana. No, this whole thing nothing makes sense anymore, which is why Cal and Stanford to the ACC is now like a sure thing. It's more of a rhetorical perspective, but nothing makes sense anymore, which is why you're going to have this sort of thing happen. But if we're really talking Cal, Stanford, ACC, two things: that grant of rights isn't disappearing for a long time, and Florida State, because they have 3 days to announce that they want to, or if they want to leave in 3 days. If you want to leave, you can leave. You have 3 days, but no one's breaking the grant of rights. Florida State granted, but they have no money to go through with to actually try to make a move. So they're just telling everybody, "Hey, we're broke, and we're just gonna let everybody know that so that we can try to get more money out of the ACC, even though they can't do anything." So what are you gonna do? You need to find more schools. Like there's, I find more videos on YouTube hacks suggesting, oh, Florida State can break out of the grant of rights. And then I saw one video of a lawyer from Virginia Tech, no less, who vigorously said, I've read the grant of rights. No one's breaking out of this thing unless you got $500 million sitting around. And even then, that's per institution. So how can we talk about multiple schools leaving unless the entire conference and mass decides to just blow the whole thing up? And as you saw from the vote, there's a solid 10 or 10 plus schools that would be on the outside, perhaps, if this whole thing went down. So the ACC has to add. And if we're available, and logistically, as I said, logistics don't seem to matter anymore, because if we're really talking pods per se, Cal and Stanford are 30 miles from each other. We could just I could just go and drive an hour down to Palo Alto, and that's it. Oregon and Washington are not exactly close by. I mean, the LA schools are, of course, they're nearly in the same zip code, relatively speaking. But if you look at every other like pairing or pod that you can make in college sports, there are very few like Cal and Stanford where you can just go and just drive into both, just land at SFO and then take a quick drive. The Carolina schools, I looked at this last night because I'm now starting to look at NC State and, Chapel Hill and Duke and Durham, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of they're all fairly close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So real close.
Yeah. So if we're really talking travel, yeah, that of course it's basically going from a flight. You're basically extending flights from, couple of hours to several hours, plus maybe add in a day for some sports. But again, LA school, like, it's going to be wild when SC plays its first game at Rutgers. And so now everybody's saying, oh, Cal and Stanford to the ACC isn't practical. I mean, nothing's practical anymore. This is how it's going to be. And if the ACC needs money, they need to add. So if you're going to, there's no, and because there's no way out of your grant of rights. The Big Ten discussion with Florida State and Clemson is interesting, but let's get like anybody who's actually read the grant of rights and listening to a lawyer who read the grant of rights saying ACC isn't getting out of this predicament for a long time, unless somebody with unimaginable amounts of money decides to really, like you're not lying on match, you're saying off and it decides to go with an atom bomb, right? You're going to need like the amount of money involved to actually break that grant of rights is so exorbitant that to even entertain a scenario where there can be lingo wrangling involved on it, it's an exercise of futility. And Florida State overplayed their hand. They don't have money, as well as all that they're saying, and there's no way for them to get more money unless you add schools. So come Monday, when no one exits, that 11 to 14 vote could be either 0, where they decide to just, drop it all together, or all schools vote in and we're in.
Well, they did have 7 schools come together a few weeks ago and challenge the grant of rights, and they need 8, correct? They need 8 to dissolve the league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's not. And here's the other interesting thing. Like I'm reading some forums of how we know some schools have more of an in than others, but let's be real. Like at least half of the schools in that conference, they're gonna be on the outside like us at some point if the ACC goes down. So that's why I think there's got to be a lot of trepidation right now with, and with this vote in particular. I'm also amused by this, and I mentioned to someone of my exasperation with this situation, and I was misunderstood, not with Cal per se, but with realignment writ large. The Pac-12 already went down, and now Cal and Stanford have become a flashpoint for an internal war in the ACC with this vote of, okay, who's in, who's really in, and if you really want out, how you're really getting out. And now it's like, now everybody's just thinking of, okay, what's the countdown now to the ACC, implosion? So so we're basically going from one bad situation to perhaps another bad situation. And so now realignment is just unfolding, like conference collapses and like members being on the outside. And so this is why with the ACC, if you need money, you only have like one way to go, or you don't do anything. But if you're still on the path to, to ruin, then like if we were on another, road to hell with the ACC, then it's just stumbling from one exit to another exit later, and other schools are going to be in the same predicament as we are. So that's my, sort of like, and we're only a week into the abyss, but I'm just thinking of like, what does the new realm eventually look like? And it's going to be really messy.
Well, like we stated off the top, it's being reported from Friday's vote that while 12 out of 15 are needed to turn the vote in the right direction to bring on new schools, they only got 11. They got 11 out of the 15. Why Notre Dame's got a full vote is beyond me, but they get 11 out of 15. And then the issue is that Florida State and the schools that are voting no, that want out of the league, they know that if they bring on Stanford and any other schools, then they're obviously not going to be voting for the dissolvement of the league. So they're going to lose those votes going forward. So they need to hang tight and gain more schools on their side. And like we brought up a couple weeks ago, maybe Florida State / Clemson / Miami can get a school or two that are kind of neutral in regards to, at least neutral from the standpoint of the Big Ten or the SEC as a valuable commodity, as kind of a package deal to include them to get enough members to pull away from the GOR.
Yeah, and on the from what happened yesterday, or what was reported yesterday, NC State is interesting because we know the other 3 schools can look elsewhere.
Yep.
I'm reading some chatter that, oh, NC State might be looked at by the SEC, and I found that comical. Where would they, if they were like, they think that they may get paired with North Carolina if
Yep.
they stick with them, but where would they really go?
Yeah, I was curious
Yeah.
about that vote as well.
Yeah, it's not, yeah, they're not going to the Big Ten, but they'd just be fine with being jettisoned and going to the Big 12. I don't know, but that yeah, so that's sort of, that baffled me, and the and so that's why, like, we're gonna, this will basically be settled by Tuesday, because that's, like, the deadline of, okay, we need to know who's for real here. But if there has been, well, and here's the interesting thing: the only one that's been making noise publicly is Florida State, and they're basically telling everybody that they're broke. Okay, Clemson, you haven't heard anything from Clemson. That would be the only other major party that's in a similar position like Florida State. And then outside of this other vote, you haven't heard anything from anybody else. So is this really just a tumult from one party, and then it all just, everybody like gets back from summer recess, and then it realizes, okay, can we actually conduct the business at hand here? We need more money. These schools bring in more money. They can, they'll need to come in pure pro rata. We throw you guys more cash, chill out until you actually pay up to exit the grant of rights in whenever. Because who would actually need to budge, or which school you think would budge on the grant of rights? Because you said you have to be what number again?
8.
Yeah, who would budge on that? Because again, if at least a lot of those, like, only a couple of those schools have, if this were to become undone right now, only a few schools would be able to be scooped up right away. Everybody else would maybe be out in the wilderness.
Yeah, and that's where it gets tricky. The numbers game is that yeah, Florida State should be good. Clemson's good. Miami, you would think, has a landing spot. To your point, North Carolina. Again, the curious vote of NC State, and on the other side, the curious vote of Miami.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't know what the reasoning is there, but I've been under the impression that while they have not been as vocal, that they would like to leave the conference, make the money that they need to compete as a football power, and join the Big Ten or the SEC, but they voted in the other direction.
Yeah, and I think they're in the same predicament as Florida State. I mean, they have more money recently, but again, they don't have, nobody has exit grant rights right now money. So I think they're just being a little smart. Well, I mean, I want to say everybody's being a little smart on the Florida State. I don't know what the hell Florida State is thinking by, I mean, yeah, they're lighting a fire here, but anybody who reads the grant of rights, any lawyer who actually, like I mean, again, there's some YouTube hacks that are saying they can use sovereign immunity, and a lawyer said, no, that's idiotic, literally. So they can't get out. So what do? You need to add.
But what is the ACC's long game in this? I understand their short game is for 13 years, they've got all these schools held hostage, but they're not going to have a conference after 2036 because they're all going to bolt, or they're going to have a downgraded conference. I shouldn't say they're all going to bolt. It's going to most likely be the same situation as we have right now, but their upper echelon schools are going to leave. They're going to have another American conference is basically what they're going to have left. And they're going to have to try to figure out how to bolster their conference or make their conference more valuable between now and then.
Yeah. And I mean, everything right now is a short-term game. I mean, maybe if we even look farther out, because it's either you're either going to have the super mega conference set up, or you won't. Or like I actually read something interesting. ACC should add Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, and Washington State, and form a West Coast pod, and then go large and start forming their own pods so they can counter the emerging super league of Big 10 and Big 12. So they can, they have to essentially go big or go home at this point. And to what you're saying, yeah, you're either going to have essentially not even a group of five, it's just have a two, and then sort of a kind of sub power five, non group of five or group of four, excuse me, and then your group of five, or just a big two and then everybody else.
And something else that gets lost here, I think, is that okay, right this second, Big Ten teams are making 59 million. We know that that's going to go to, and we hear the reports; they're all over the place. They're between 75 and 90 million per team. The SEC is right now at 50 million. That's going to go somewhere behind. It's $1 billion per year contract for the Big Ten, and I think it's 800 million for the SEC, and then the ACC sitting at 39 million. So while the average payout for the ACC for the length of this contract is slightly behind the Big 12, people need to remember that it's an escalating contract. And so the ACC is doing better per season and will going forward than the Big 12. And the numbers I pulled today were 39.4 million starting next season. So that's one aspect of it. And then also, what was I going to get to after that? Just that, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. If you've got anywhere to go, Alex, take it away. Shoot, I was going to land this plane
It's
somewhere and I
essentially the
forgot it.
upshot is this. If if the differences per school per year that you may be getting are like 5-10 million, like I was, there are other, and someone said there, deals would be renegotiated, but then also how does the landscape change over time where I think maybe you or another video I saw, the ACC thought they were getting a sweet deal when they signed their deal through 2036 back in, when did they sign it? Like in 2013 or whenever. They
Yeah.
thought, oh, it's a sweet long-term deal, we're set. And now a decade in, oh no, we're screwed for the next decade plus. So do you really, are conferences really going to be like, we're going to have shorter deals longer term, like the AC, like they could renegotiate the deal just to make it shorter, and that just calms everybody down for a handful of years. But it's all like everything right now is a bit reactionary. And again, long like no one's really looking at this longer term, more than a decade out anymore. And is that really going to be, because if we're going to have teams shuffling or wanting to shuffle so often, then just scrap conferences together and go to a like active by the year relegation system or tiering of football, so that you can have fluidity. So you can either have fluidity, or if you want to, have it like, I mean, it's just a 100+ year conference go up in smoke, but you can either have conferences where you can like know that, hey, I show up to a home game and we're playing this team. I'll be showing up as alum 20 years later and we're playing this team. Or you just go a full like sort of floaty relegation system, and then you don't but at that point you don't really know who you're playing by the year unless you're one of those like top 15, 20 programs. But even then, that sort of rips away from what college fans' expectations are every season of, hey, we got this rivalry game, we're going to be playing at this stadium like we do every year. So at that point, then it's a literally a different game. And I don't know if that's what people want.
No, people like tradition. People like to know who their rivals are, and they want stability. They don't want every 4 years we're going to have a changing landscape, and we're going to have the upper echelon stabilized, but this fluctuating, where schools are jumping for better deals every 6 or 8 years, just kind of like Colorado did here in the last couple months.
And just on that for a second, when I'm interested to see when we have teams starting to fall out, because I think with
fallout meaning getting kicked out,
or meaning like look in so with Nebraska, unless they really want the Big Ten money, they have not had a pleasant experience in the Big Ten would they want to look at maybe going back to the Big 12 now that Colorado is back in that league and restarting that rivalry? Because Colorado went to the Pac 12 because if Nebraska wasn't going to be in the Big 12 and they were going to go into the Big 10, then like Colorado hasn't had a rivalry game essentially since then. Like Colorado and Nebraska, that was their game. Would they want to fall back? Would Nebraska decide to fall back out of a situation where it hasn't done well, and so all parties are satisfied? So I mean, that's one scenario, but yeah, I don't know if teams getting kicked out. I don't know when that starts, but I could see some schools deciding that, I don't and as you said, is it really worth the 5-10+ million bucks? Like Notre Dame, for example, they're not going to a conference because they don't and Notre Dame there's a handful of schools that don't need them. More money does not matter in realignment discussions, and Stanford's one of them as well. They don't their endowment's bigger than the GDP of most countries. Okay, so there are some schools where the money may not matter. What's the situation that we actually want? And then that also starts some shuffling. But yeah. So I mean, I think unless Nebraska is really getting a ton of Big Ten money, I could see them exiting and out back to the Big 12 maybe by the end of the decade.
Well, I don't, just because of the money disparity.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I agree with everything that you're saying about if truth be known, and we could talk to the administration and in their heart of hearts, and they would be honest, they would say that this was not a great move. And football fans know it was not a great move for recruiting reasons and for cultural reasons and for natural rivalry reasons. And like you just pointed out, Colorado runs to the Pac-12 at the same time, basically, that Nebraska runs to the Big Ten, and they found that they had no rivals and no common ground there. Alex, appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, we'll be talking more in the next 3 days because no one's leaving the ACC, man. But is it going to get bigger? We'll find out.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Alex. Have a good day.
Thanks.
All right. Don't you hate that when you got a thought in your head and I was going to lead us somewhere and it's gone? It's gone. After it had to sit there for like 5 or 10 minutes. Gone. All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Do want to get to a couple super chats. Appreciate John here coming in with 9 Mountain West Conference teams vote to break, join the Pac-4 minus Hawaii, New Mexico, and Wyoming. That's 13. Then go get SMU, Tulane, and Rice. That's the new Pac conference with no exit fee issues. No exit fee issues because they're not joining the Pac. I guess the Pac would be joining them, correct? So if technically the Pac schools are joining the Mountain West 9, then you're all set. But if it's going the other direction, then there's a... So again, we don't know the legalities and how the contracts are written, but technically, if the league is going to be called the Pac Conference and it's a departure from the Mountain West to the Pac Conference, then exit fees have to be paid. But if it's the Pac-4 or the Pac-2, Oregon State and Washington State leaving for the Mountain West, then you've got a plan here that might be feasible. I know that SMU's hoping for better than that, and Tulane going all the way across country to play football games as well. The ACC might want to scoop up Tulane. They could pick up possibly SMU and Tulane. They have yet to vote on SMU. That apparently is coming this weekend or maybe into Monday. That the same board that voted down, at least temporarily, or did not receive enough votes. And see that becomes an issue when you've got a league that is voting in one direction, like the majority of the league is wanting something, but it's not enough of the league. It's not the 75%. Well, that's an issue. There's dissension there. If you have the majority of the league that wants to go in a direction, but they're not getting their way because you have dissenters. But there's a reason why, of course, if you set up a league that you want an overwhelming majority to upset the league in any way to bring in members. You want it to pass with a significant margin. So I get why the rules are set up that way, but I'm just saying you've got the majority of the league that want Stanford and Cal because they want to fortify the league. John comes back with this: if Mountain West breaks, then no exit fee. Okay, so if they break up, okay. If it's not just a individual school or schools leaving the Mountain West that have to pay the exit fee, okay, got it. That the league disbands and is no more. Got it. All right, welcome in the voice of college football. Next on the line, we got Chris.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Chris, what's going on?
I was just gonna, sorry, getting in. I was just gonna ask you, I think it was a previous caller kind of referenced it a little bit. Is it, I know that there's like a division between, it's called what, the P5, G5 sort of separation, all that.
Yes.
But with realignment, is that still gonna, kind of the way I was curious was, there's gonna, if everybody breaks towards like the Big Ten or whatever, I know that's kind of what everybody seems to think is going to happen. It might happen anyway, but does there still going to be that division, you think, between, or is that going to maybe with kind of like what that super chat, with the G5, I guess, including some of those G5 teams, is that going to maybe will that either, do you think that'll elevate some of those G5 teams, or is that going to, what do you think will happen if that sort of thing happens, I guess, with that?
Well, some of them have been elevated, of course, by joining the Big 12. And if the upper echelon of the Mountain West is able to solidify their league, or in this case, as was mentioned in the super chat, go to the PAC conference, then that goes back to the first conversation I had with the first caller, was who does make that determination? I don't have the answer to that question, because right now, in terms of what all of us care about, it's just how are these leagues being labeled toward entry into the college football playoff. And right now we've got a Power 5 and we've got a Group of 5, and they've got rules that are set up that go forward into this 2024 college football playoff. But we already have one league that's, on life support, the PAC conference. So that's going to have to be altered already, most likely. And you're right. Who's to decide what are power conferences and what are not power conferences?
Well, I'm not necessarily, like I noticed, for example, he was including like Rice and Tulane. And, I think those are probably decent programs, regardless of what conference they play in. But I guess maybe what I'm trying to ask you is, for example, we have those teams that are moving into the American Athletic Conference this season, from CUSA, I guess. And that's going to let CUSA, I guess, include some new teams and maybe even get up to 9 or 10 or whatever it is. But I guess at what point does it become a matter of, I guess, what determines, I guess, or at least in your opinion, what makes a team a power? Is it just the quality of football, or there other things that go into it besides just the way they play?
Well, there's a legal portion of this that I can't really explain. That's never necessarily been explained to me, or I've not investigated it. But that there is it's not just an evaluation of, okay, these are the best football conferences, therefore these are the Power 5. There is a contract that
I understand.
That is part of that.
No, I understand that, because I remember with the college football playoff, I don't know how many people know this or not, but I think that was when they actually, I know before there was like a way to kind of distinguish the two. It was like, major, whatever they wanted to call it, I guess. I mean, people kind of understood that there was like a separation between, the very good programs and the ones that I guess maybe, I don't think they're bad, but people might want to use that word. I don't think that's really fair, but but I think it was with the CFP, I think they actually initiated a new way of just determining, I don't know how they used it, but so you had the separation that was kind of created with the CFP. And I was just curious, with the CFP kind of, I'm not saying it's going away, but it's changing. If that's going to change the way these teams are, is it still going to be the separation, or is it going to be maybe the G5 can maybe move up is it going to be one of those things where they're going to be evaluated maybe and prove if they can maybe are there going to be at-large bids, or how's that? Do you know how that's going to work? The conferences?
For the playoff. You mean?
Well, not necessarily. I just mean in terms of like, you know how like with the BCS, it's like they had like an at-large bid. I mean, they
Yes.
just did. They had okay, but you didn't just get it. You had to earn it. Is there going to be something like that? Do you think with the playoff? Yeah. Is there going to be something kind of like that where they can maybe earn a spot?
Well, until the rules are changed, much like the BCS, there are going to be selections made to the playoff, and
I know
there's currently a selection committee.
Well,
And the rule is that at least one G5 team is guaranteed a spot.
Well, the way it is right now, I think that's the way it is. But I thought the way I understood it was that they're going to admit 6 conference champions. And
Well,
I don't know. Am I
That's
wrong about
not
that?
the way it is right this second. But when I said that's the way it is, I meant will be starting in 2024.
Oh, I see. So there really isn't an automatic bid for a G5. They have to, even now they kind of have to advance. They have to be selected to it, right? I mean, did Tulane actually, I know they weren't in the playoff, but when they got the at-large bid to
Okay, you're talking, well, that's a completely different thing, talking about the New Year's 6 versus the playoff. So
Yeah.
so there is a
Well,
guaranteed spot for the G5 in the New Year's 6. Yes. Just like the BCS.
but it isn't like the BCS though. It's different, right? Isn't it kind of different?
Well, it's not based on the BCS formula.
Now
The-
was I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, no, was the push to move to 12? This is the thing I'm kind of trying to lead into, and I'm not very good at doing that, but forgive me.
You're fine.
Was the push to 12, was that based partly on the fact that you had all these teams? Because I know we had the New Year's 6, which included what, 12? I mean, to me, it was just kind of like one of those things where it's like we already have 12. I mean, is that kind of what the playoff will be? It was going to be maybe picking those, but instead of representing them to a New Year's 6 bowl game, it's going to be in a playoff. Is that kind of the idea? Because it's still going to be 12, right? It was 12 before, right?
Yes. The New Year's 6 obviously involves 12 teams.
Well, no, but I mean, is it going to be the same idea where you're going to have a committee pick all 12, or is there going to be a way for a team to? I mean, how do they advance? Do they get
Well, there are automatic entries into the playoff. If you win a conference, you're in.
Yeah, but
If
You
you
told
win
me
a Power 5 conference, you're in. If you are the highest ranked of the group of 5 champions, you're in. And then the committee is going to select the rest of the spots.
I thought you told me if there had been a playoff last year that it might not have included Tulane because they said that there was a team that actually ranked, if they limited it to the top 12, which I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying if they did,
No,
that it wouldn't
I
have included.
apologize. I apologize if I miscommunicated that. What I stated was that Tulane would be in the playoff. There would always be a group of 5. If we applied the future rules, 2024, to last year, Tulane would have been the highest ranked group of 5 team. So even though they weren't in the top 12, I believe they were 16th, they would have been in the playoff as the highest ranked group of 5 champion.
But that doesn't have to do with, because I know they said they were going to admit the top 6 conference champions, so they don't get under that provision. It's just based on the fact they're a G5. Because that's what I mean. I thought there was a
the top 6 champions do include a group of 5, at least.
Well, that's kind of what I mean. Did they get on under the fact they're a G5 or the fact it's the top 6? Because I think it's the opposite, isn't it? Where the top 6 is what go.
Isn't that kind of it's kind of an oxymoron. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter if it's top 6 or a group of 5, it's going to be a group of 5 because there's only 5 Power 5 conferences. So they have to take a group of 5 champion if they're going to take the top 6 champions.
So but still that only selects 6 out of the 12. So the remaining 6 then are guaranteed to be from a power conference then, or is there going to be another provision maybe?
No, they're not guaranteed. They could be group of 5 teams, but they're not going to be.
Why not? I mean, I guess I don't.
Well, if you just go through the history of college football, you will find that if a committee is selecting the top 12 teams in the country and one spot goes to a group of 5 champion, so they're selecting the top 6 teams in the country that are not conference champions, none of them are going to be group of 5 teams.
Well, I was just kind of, like with last year, and I know maybe last year isn't the best example, but, we had Tulane. You say Tulane probably would go, which makes sense to me.
They would have gone.
Okay.
It's not,
Well, I
It's
got
not up to me. They would have been in the playoff last year based on the rules going forward in 2024.
I thought that the people that you have kind of working with you, they all said that they'd put Tulane in there, but it was only because they qualify for the at-large spot. It wasn't because they necessarily thought they deserved to be there. Am I wrong about that? I thought they were kind of saying, yeah, we'll put Tulane in there, but it's only because they didn't really have another option. They had to kind of, I thought they were all coming around to kind of being like, oh yeah, we need to make sure Tulane gets in there because they're really good. But I thought it was more about the fact that they didn't have a choice. But it doesn't really matter to me. I just,
the rule starting in 2024 is that the top group of 5 champion will be, or if we want to take it, the technical verbiage is the top 6 champions will be selected to the playoff.
Yeah, but with Pac-12 kind of going out of vogue
yes,
or whatever.
You're right. That could, who knows what they're going to do now. If there's no Pac-12, then
so we might be talking about maybe another G5. I
doubt it.
Okay.
You might be right, Chris. That could be the way they go. I highly doubt it. It's a TV show with TV ratings. So they're going to say, you know what? We're going with the top 5 champions and 4 are going to be power conferences and then the G5.
Well, I guess the question I have, Mark, it's like, you don't think an Air Force Academy is going to draw much of a television they're not going to be a high rated television draw, the Air Force? I don't have to be Air Force or a Boise State or any one of those teams you want to bring into it. You don't think that people are going to necessarily, the television market in Colorado Springs isn't big enough to make people want to watch it? I don't quite understand that whole argument.
No is the answer, the short answer, but to be more nuanced about it, first of all, the viewing public is not going to want to see what they don't believe to be the 12 best teams in the country.
Okay.
There is a nuance there that allows for a group of 5 champion, which generally is not considered one of the top 12 teams in the country. And I think people can allow for that and say they earned it. They're the best of the group of 5. Here they are. But to select another one, no.
Well, but you said if they're the top 6 conferences, all they have to do is be in the top 6 somewhere, though, right? To get in.
Well, that's the way it stands right now with a Pac-12 involved. But if there's no Pac-12, I would be a little bit surprised if they stay with the same rules.
Oh, so they're going to change the rules.
If there's no Pac conference, they will then have reason to change the rules.
Makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I understand what you're saying. But, again, the other question I have, Mark, not to press the point, but you don't think, for example, like the Conference USA champion, they're not going to be a team that you think would be even worth considering? Just for example, I'm just picking them out of a Conference USA.
Who won Conference USA? Let's see. Texas San Antonio. Who won it last year? Texas San Antonio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Well, no, they're not one of the 12 best teams in the country.
Okay.
They're not close.
Western Kentucky.
They won Conference USA, or
no? This year it might be Western Kentucky.
Oh, I got you.
You don't think they're a very good team?
No, I'm not. Again, I don't want to say that they're not a very good team, but we're comparing them to the kind of teams that they would play in a playoff.
I think they play Ohio State this year.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll get a kind of a direct comparison between the best of the CUSA against the best of the Big Ten. Yes,
we will. And I will take a 40-point spread.
That's fair, I guess.
Well, Ohio State played Bowling Green, and they won the MAC last year, correct?
I don't know.
I believe so. And Ohio State put up 77 points.
No, that was Toledo. I think they beat Toledo. Wasn't it Toledo?
Oh, who did I say? Bowling Green. Yes, Toledo. I'm sorry. I meant Toledo. Yeah, the Rockets.
Yeah, they beat Toledo pretty bad.
Yes.
7 touchdowns or something, or 10. Can't remember. It was like 10 touchdowns. I don't remember. 8 touchdowns.
I think they scored 11, actually, at 77. So
they put it to him, Mark. They took him to the woodshed.
They did.
All right. I've taken enough of your time, Mark. Thanks for your time.
Well, I appreciate it, Chris. You have a good day.
Bye.
All right. We will keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Our aim this afternoon and jumping on here was to look at this Stanford Cal situation with the ACC. I think it's highly entertaining from the standpoint of measuring the pros and cons, because the pros are obvious. This is the finest, one of the finest schools in the country, like a top 5 school in the country academically. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. Now, and the incredible endowment and the research, the prestige, everything that comes with it, with Stanford and with Cal. And then Stanford has an athletic program that's as good as any athletic program in the country, top to bottom. But nobody shows up at the football games, and they got to travel cross country, and they got a bad football program right now, which I think is overstated. Stanford was good 5 years ago. They can be really good. All right. We got our guy Tim on the line. Tim, what's going on? Hello, Tim.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, what's up?
Well, just actually, I wasn't going to talk about Stanford, but I guess you brought up, we could bring them up first. The issue with Stanford is football's changed, and that's kind of the theme. What I'm trying to call it right now has been quite a debate in the chat regarding football and football changing. And you brought up, rightfully so, Stanford was really strong. Shaw had them really cranking, following through on the Harbaugh success, but losing Mason and a couple other coordinators and stuff, that really started piece number one. But college football is slowly being unraveled as we knew it. The age of the mid-tier team making a run at the national championship is all but gone, really, in my opinion. And the fact that with a team like Stanford, they're not going to play the NIL game. I mean, maybe they will. Okay, I can't speak for Stanford, but it seems like they've fallen behind because they are not doing what a lot of other teams are doing. Yeah. As far as the transfer portal, you don't just portal into Stanford. Yeah. There are certain schools. A lot of schools talk about how academics are really important to them. But really, if you want to see that where the academics really the importance are, look at the teams that are now active in the portal and taking random guys left, right, and center. And then they claim academic superiority. That's really a bad sign. But for Stanford, they literally are being absolutely removed from competition for just so many of these transfers. So that's going to make it more and more so difficult for them to compete on a high stage. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mark?
So, yeah, I didn't get to those points that I've talked about in the past. Yes, it's difficult to get into Stanford. They've always had that that going against their admission for the football program and recruiting. That's always been something they've had to deal with. Now they've been very good about saying, hey, we look at it as a positive when there's a really bright football player that he's more likely to come play for us because of what we can offer academically. So it helps them probably out of 1 out of every 50 cases, but the other 49 go against them and always have. But it's so much more pronounced now. Yes, I totally agree. Like you, I can't speak to the NIL game and exactly what's going on there, but it only makes sense that there's no reason for them to be that. Not that there aren't some factions out there that possibly could be forming collectives and that they don't exist, but to the degree that they happen at other places, I just can't imagine. I kind of wondered beyond that. Stanford was trending down before we got hit with all this in the last 3 years. And I just didn't know if it was a bad run for David Shaw or what it was. But I'm just making the case that if those things, the NIL and the transfer portal, weren't in the way, that certainly they've shown that they can play at a high level, of course. But man, I still have to think that that is more positive than negative for the ACC. And because they don't need an elite, well, it would be great if they got one to fortify the league, but an elite football program, they need a viable football program, and then they get all the other benefits of the school and the money and academically and the prestige and all of that, and the Olympic sports that are remarkable. And you're adding another Virginia level football program. Stanford at its worst is Virginia in football.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a lot of factors for Stanford. I mean, they have shown in the previous iteration of what we enjoyed, at least I enjoyed growing up my entire life watching football, when there wasn't such a difference between the haves and have-nots. I mean, we've seen that recently, and just even recent TV contracts. This next round of TV contracts are really going to make programs that are in the ACC and the Big 12 and whatever is remaining of the Pac-12, Pac-4, whatever they have going on. It's going to be non-competitive.
Yeah.
You know, when you got teams making $80 to $100 million a year and your team's making 30, how do you really compete with that? And there's a lot of angry fans out there saying that, you know, that certain fans are bitter. Again, the equivalent is that USC was on the USS Pac-12 that was taking on water, and they didn't hop into a life raft. They had a Carnival Cruises coming by with all you can drink, playmates on board and everything, and saying, "Hey, you guys, you want to come with us?" Sure, you know. And then there's other programs that are in the way, though. I mean, if you're a G5 school and you got picked up by the Big 12, it's a huge jump for your program. It really is. But it doesn't make that conference any better. I would argue it even actually dilutes the conference when you lose an Oklahoma or a Texas, which are premier programs and blue bloods in the sport, and then you bring on a bunch of teams that are great fans and really play great football, but they're not going to compete for a playoff championship.
No.
Can you think right now in 2024? Can you think of one team in the? And I'm saying make the playoffs. I'm saying challenge for a national championship. Can anyone in the chat or you, Mark, name one team that's going to have a prayer? And not because of program of this or program that. It's just there's the haves and have-nots, and there always have been. But what's happening now is the difference between the haves and have-nots have been multiplied. So Is there any team you can think of, Mark, that would fit a national championship caliber program?
No, and this is the way I've explained it, because I've been on record to say I will take anyone's money that, and of course this isn't going to happen because we're not going to hold money for 10 years, but I will give the Big 12 10 years to win a national championship. And I just don't see it. I know things change. I know things change that we don't see, but we've got the chess pieces in play for the next 10 plus years. So we know the way the structure, and we know the two that own the sport. And now that Oklahoma and Texas have been removed from the Big 12, who is the last national champion from the Big 12? Well, the easy answer is BYU in 1984, but of course they weren't a member of the conference. That was a completely different world. That was actually a freakish circumstance where they didn't even play a top 50 team in the country. So that's a one-off. But in terms of existing Big 12 members, you got to go back to the 1930s to where there is a national championship. They're not winning a national championship. And I believe, to your point, there's a whole other level of play and accomplishment reaching the playoff versus winning the playoff. Even as it stands right now with 4 teams, there's it's just another, we've seen Washington go in 2016, even Michigan State being a Big 10 team. They weren't prepared. They weren't at that level, and they got wiped off the face of the earth. And that's happened a few times when teams that weren't of that elite caliber reach the playoff, and the Big 12 is full of those teams at the top. So I just don't see it, and it's going to become magnified. See, people think that the opportunity is going to be greater with 12 teams. Yes, it is. There's more opportunity, but it's going to be twice as difficult to win a national championship, reaching the playoff. So actually their chances of pulling off a miracle like TCU did last year and then losing by 58 points in the championship game, that is going to be minimized 90% by the chances of you going through. Let's just take, because one of the games may not be against some daunting opponent, but let's say you had to defeat Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and USC 4 consecutive games to win a national championship. That's just not happening. Oklahoma State's not doing that. TCU's not doing that.
No, and there's people in the chat. There's there's a Big 12 fan in the chat saying that the TCU is the is the Big 10 champion because they beat Michigan. And I gotta tell him that, what do you think TCU's record would have been if they had played in the Big 12 the entire conference, the entire season? Do you think they really would have made the playoffs? I mean, that's a question you have to ask yourself, number one. Number two, what Max Duggan did, was truly amazing. Sonny Dykes and Riley, just the way that it's a great run, and no one should diminish what TCU did on the field. I'm not diminishing that. But you have to bring a level of reality. Once this big party, I know there was a lot of anger towards the Pac-12 when they were seen for being snobbish, and they didn't want to take on some Big 12 teams when they were struggling. And so we're going to get our revenge, and we're so glad the Pac-12 is gone now because you should have taken us. And when in reality, there were no additive teams in the Big 12 at that point that were going to help the Pac-12 as well financially to even get a better TV contract. It probably wasn't going to happen. It may have made them survive, right? So survivability would have been great to bring on 3 or 4 teams, but it wasn't like they were all of a sudden going to become competitive with the Big 10 or the SEC. And the problem is you would survive as a conference, as a zombie conference where you're alive, but are you alive for anything that's important? You're a walking shell of what the Big 12 used to be. The Big 12 had some of the greatest programs in college football history, which have all now left. And people get mad at me. What's that?
It depends what the objective is. You're right. If you're playing for a national championship, your conference is insignificant.
Correct. Well, I mean, that's pretty much the purpose. That's why there's a pecking order in college football, is about national championships. Now, there's going to be teams playing football and colleges playing football no matter what happens, even 20 years from now, I think. But how will it be important? Will they be on television? Will people even be watching some of these games? And I think that what happened when the Pac-12 went down, because let me repeat again, somebody in the chat who wants to say that I'm bitter. I've never been a Pac-12 guy. There are Pac-12 guys, and my hat's to them. But I've really only cared about USC my entire life. I've been a USC fan my entire life. I've never really, matter of fact, it doesn't help me if a team like Washington wins the national championship, if UCLA wins the Pac-12, it wins a bowl, like a big prestigious bowl game. It helps them to get better recruits. Why on earth are you hoping that your competition has more success? There's some level to it because you don't want to have a situation where you win 11 games and get left out of a playoff. That level of it, you do kind of pull for your conference. But there's very few fans, if you're really honest, to sit there and just pull for your conference. You have an allegiance to a team. I'm sure there's some fans out there that love a conference. But I mean, really, at the end of the day, you're really rooting for your team. And if you're telling me that, yeah, this conference is it, this conference is that, great. How's your team doing in that conference? Are you really happy with football when your team's 4-8, but your conference is the best conference in the country? I mean, are you really that happy? I don't know. I'll bet you would trade in a second to be in the Big 12 and go undefeated than have a 4-8 in the SEC. I would guess that right away. The worry I have is for the health of the entire sport. That's what people got to realize. Big 12, you got some revenge. I'll give you that because, I understand it. If you're at Kansas State and you're asking to get into the Pac-12, they said, yeah, kick rocks, good luck, I hope you survive. I understand being a bit angry. But what happened when the Pac-12 went down, now you're on the clock. How long until you're quote unquote irrelevant in the picture of the sport? And what I worry about is if you think about it, they were going to have auto bids. And getting into a 12-team playoff is going to be awesome for a lot of these programs, but they've got zero shot of winning. I mean, the highest. You look at the Big Dance. They do that because they want to keep college basketball fans feeling like you're in it. You whatever the odds are, you have a chance of winning it, right? But in reality, there's never been a number 9 or worse seed ever to win the tournament. But yet they seed it all the regions with 16 teams. Why? So everyone buys in. Because those fans of the smaller programs are following basketball in general because they feel a part of the process. And I think what Fox and ESPN are doing is they're ruining football, because what made this really important wasn't watching the best teams on TV. It was watching the upsets. It was watching Stanford beat USC. It's watching Appalachian State beat Michigan. It's those kind of games that we love to watch, and that's why people tune in. And the fans of Big 12 teams, I guarantee it, are watching the SEC games, and watching this stuff. They're going to lose those fans. Once the Big 12 figures out, we have no shot. Everyone else is making $100 million a year, and we're making 30. We can't compete. That's when you're going to sober up. And every step towards that, like, again, removing conferences like the Pac-12, the ACC will get ripped apart next. And maybe the Big 12 will hang around because, again, which programs are going to get ripped around? But what's going to happen is the competitive nature of the sport is going to be consolidated to conferences.
Yeah, I was trying to weigh that in my mind as well when you were talking about who's going to care and what is going to be the purpose of the Big 12 playing football. And again, it depends what your drive is to watch the games and everything. If you just want full stadiums of rabid fans at Texas Tech and Kansas State and elsewhere, and a couple million people watching on TV and gunning for a conference championship, then that's great. That is truly great. I'm not saying that in a condescending way, because that's what I like about the sport. I like 1985, go to the Rose Bowl as a Pac-12 and Big Ten champion, and go to the Sugar Bowl as the SEC champion and all of that. But in terms of, we're all going to be hyper-focused on the playoff, and especially when this goes to 12 teams. And certainly the Big 12, as it stands right now for the foreseeable future, is going to have a place at the table, if not two places. But I guess if their champion goes and loses by a couple, 3-4 touchdowns every year, to your point, Tim, I don't know, Joe football fan whose favorite team is Kansas State, and he doesn't see that conference competing in the playoff competing for a championship after 5 years, whether they might be drawn more to watching, Georgia, Tennessee, or USC and Michigan, and thinking these are the games that really matter, so I'm going to watch those games. I can't answer that.
Yeah. And again, this is not an anti-big. See, people get all hurt. Their feelings get hurt when you give them facts and they think that you're against them or you're a Pac-12 guy. I will tell you, I'm not a Pac-12 guy. I think I've been very clear whenever I've been on any show that I'm not a Pac-12 guy. Sure, I don't. When someone says things about the Pac-12 that are inaccurate, sure, I'm gonna bring it up. But I would challenge anyone to say me ever coming on and like during bowl season rooting for Oregon or rooting for UCLA. I would challenge you to find me doing that. I call my own conference out more than probably anybody. So I'm not sure about that. And I just see this as a really sad time for college football, because most of us see it. Most of us seeing this thing slipping away. Now, I don't know what the end game's going to be. Who knows? Maybe it might be great for the haves, but I just can't seeing it being a positive for any of the have-nots, especially when that gap that's always been big, Mark. When you talk about the big schools, even within conferences, we talked about the same teams over and over again. And once in a while, you have Cinderella teams because, well, everyone was getting paid pretty much the same amount, right? There were some outliers, but everyone got the same amount of TV money roughly over the years. Well, now you got programs making 3 times as much as your conference. How on earth can you ask your athletic department to keep up with a Georgia or an Alabama who's making close to $100 million a year, or Ohio State, when your program's making $30 million a year? How do you keep your coaches from being poached?
And then in addition to that, Tim, you're just talking about the TV money. We checked out, we did a Iowa deep dive with Tony Altimore the other night, and he's got all the numbers. When you look at the amount of money, let's take Florida State and Ohio State as a comparison. Florida State in football last year made $50 million, and Ohio State made $137 million. So that's the difference in TV money, which right now is like 58 and 39 million. So that's only 19 out of that, whatever, $87 million gap. Only 19 million of that currently is TV. The TV is going to explode next year. That's just Ohio State, I guess, merchandise and everything else they got going on, where they've got that much of a gap over a Florida State already. And this is before the TV contract kicks in.
Yeah, and well, that comes along with winning, Mark. Everyone loves winners. I remember, believe me, I can tell you the difference between me walking through airports around this country when Pete Carroll was at USC and when Clay Helton was at USC. When Pete Carroll was there, you can go to anywhere in the country, Atlanta, and you'd see USC gear. When Miami was on top of their game, you would see Miami gear all over the country. Notre Dame, same thing. Notre Dame has a huge fan base, but I don't see as many Notre Dame flags as I do as when they're winning national championships and they were considered the top of the sport. Notre Dame's a great program. They've been pretty consistent, but they're not what they once were in this sport. That is a big part of all of this. And I would caution all the fans to stop fighting with each other and maybe start fighting against Fox and ESPN gobbling up the entire conference and the entire sport. And there's someone made a comment. Where was it? Sorry, these things drift so fast about capitalism, and if you hear in my voice or if you heard anywhere during this conversation that I sound like I'm for any of this, I think you need to go back and rewind and listen. I am completely against what's happening in college football. And it started a long time ago with all the way back to NBC and the Irish getting an unfair TV contract. Then it was the SEC and then the Big Ten. There's been a lot of very unfair situations, and that's just going to get worse. Back then, it was a drop in the bucket. Right now, and someone said also, what was it, Mark? They said that NIL will even everything out. You have to remember, you don't have unlimited donors. The donors give money to the program, right? In the old days, for facilities and stuff. Think of a Phil Knight situation. Phil Knight giving millions of dollars to have the best facilities up in Eugene. Well, now he's giving money to NIL. And whereas a guy like Phil Knight's probably a bad example because he probably has close to unlimited money. Think of your donors at your school. Let's say a Big 12 school, right? Giving money. They have two choices. They can give to the university towards facilities, towards coaches, towards coaching staffs, whatever, towards recruiting budgets, or they could give it to NIL. You can't give it to both. So if you if you think you're going to even it out by giving it NIL, well, your program's already making way less than everybody else for your facilities, your coaching staffs, etc. If you stop giving to them and you start giving to NIL, well, that's going to cause even more problems within the infrastructure of your athletic department. And also, think of it this way, all those other sports, those non-revenue sports you do love, the money what used to be donated and it would go to a general fund is now going to football players. So what's going to happen to those programs as well? You guys got to look at the bigger picture and stop doing these victory laps when you realize that nobody's winning in any of this. The sport is losing in all of this.
I completely agree with you. And just back to the comment about TCU and the Big Ten and so forth, to back up what you said, what TCU did last season was remarkable. And TCU's run a tremendous program for 20 years with Gary Patterson, of course, building it. We have Melissa Treebwasser on here from Frogs Insider all the time. I give all respect to TCU and what they accomplished, but you can make any narrative you want out of one football game. So we can make all sorts of narratives. We can pick on any school in the country for a particular game that they lost and say, well, this is true because of this one result in a football game. No, it's not. So that's one game that doesn't prove anything. It showed that TCU was the better team on the day. They earned the win, kind of freakish game, but absolutely earned the win. And they went to the national championship game.
Yeah. And then that happened.
Yeah.
I'm saying that right there is the example of what millions and millions of SEC dollars as far as infrastructure and coaching, and again, donors and NIL and players and location. I'm not saying that the have-nots are not all about money. It has a lot to do with location as well. But that's why TCU never had a chance in that game, because if you look at some point, I don't care how good you're coaching, Sonny Dykes and has it going. I don't care how big the heart is on Max Duggan. He's going up against that defensive front seven of Georgia.
Yeah, an NFL team.
And that's, you're going to see more and more of those type games between the best team in one conference and even the mid-level teams in another conference. It's just becoming Well, again, haves and have not. So just my 2 cents. I spent about an hour trying to explain this in the chat. I thought it'd be faster if I just said it on air. I don't get why so many programs are so excited about what's happening in college football. They need to stop and look at what's happening. It's almost like, I'm not going to get into politics, but it's a lot to do with just our national politics. Everyone wants to fight with each other, when in reality, the people are fighting each other. The other people are laughing to the bank. I'm just going to say that,
Yeah, it's a good point.
So really, we could fight with each other as far as this conference or that conference. At the end of the day, Fox and ESPN are getting rich, and they love that we're fighting, because then they can do whatever the hell they want, and at whose expense? And it's going to be expensive college football. So, all right, Mark, thanks for letting me vent for a little bit.
Good stuff, Tim. Appreciate it. That was our guy, Tim Prangley. And of course, you can join Tim and Rick on Sunday night for Trojan Conquest Live. It's Trojan Conquest Live. It's every Sunday night, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, where it counts, there on the West Coast USC channel. Get there. It's a good time. Read the super chat, and then I'll get to Larry on the line here. We got My Rhino. Is Notre Dame part of the ACC grant of rights, or can they leave any time? Rumor is Florida State said Notre Dame joined the league, and we will vote for Stanford and Cal. Would Notre Dame entry change dollars? Okay. All right. A lot to go through there. Notre Dame part of the grant of rights. That's a great question, because how could they be part of the grant of rights unless their portion of the grant of rights simply states that their attachment is in all these other sports, and their only attachment in football is that they've got to schedule 5 or 6 football games each season with the conference. Maybe that's their part of the grant of rights from a football standpoint, is that they are just locked into scheduling ACC teams. I can't answer that question, but that's a great question, because either they have no part of the grant of rights and they are just simply a member. But I would have to think that they would have to be a member and under the grant of rights if they are a voting member of the conference. If they're not, then that is complete insanity beyond belief that the ACC is letting them get away with that. So that's a good point, because that's never brought up in discussions, or rarely that I've ever heard, about Notre Dame's ability to go and join the Big Ten or whatever. Rumors Florida State said Notre Dame joined the league and we will vote. Okay. Florida State said, hey, Notre Dame, you got to join the league. And that would make total sense. That would make total sense for Florida State, because they know that they would have a much different league with Notre Dame. Then they get Stanford and Cal. And I still think Stanford and Cal are tremendous additions for other reasons. Would Notre Dame entry change the money? Well, yeah. I got to think that there's no question that the ACC could squeeze a ton of more money out of ESPN with Notre Dame. However, the problem is not that they wouldn't squeeze a lot more money out of them, but once you distribute it among 15 or 16 schools, does a lot of money become much money? No. Let's do some real rough math here. Let's say the ACC contract is paying each school $39 million right now for football. $39 million per school times 14. Do the quick math. What's that, like $550 million? Okay. So that makes, let's say, in theory, the average school, the average team in the ACC, the middle value team in the ACC is worth $39 million. And let's say Florida State's worth $90 million and Clemson's worth $90 million and Syracuse and Boston College are worth $12 million. So let's say Notre Dame's worth more than all of them. They're worth $140 million. And even if ESPN agreed to that, said, okay, we're going to give you $140 million because we now have Notre Dame football. And it's no longer with NBC. It's no longer at risk to go to the Big Ten, NBC, CBS, and Fox. Well, you take that $140 million divided by 16 schools, and we're at 17 schools. We're at like $8 million more per. That's a nice bit of money to pop them up to $47 million, but they're still not competing with the SEC and the Big Ten. So that's a big addition, but once you divide it, it dwindles down considerably. And I know my math was probably rough, but it's probably in the ballpark. Welcome in, Larry. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Hey, my phone may die.
Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Yeah, Tim's got some really valid points. It's going to make it harder for mid teams with a lower budget, to make it all the way. But in retrospect, actually, I'm not sure what Ohio State made. I know you were saying $50 million from FSU, but their overall program made $160 million if you go to the Knight website. But I think they had over 40 million in donor money. So without the donor money, corporate sponsors, league payouts, they actually made $120 million. So I think it was like 161 or 162 million that the athletics brought in.
I was taking that from Tony's chart. He had Florida State, and this was football and men's basketball, which I got to think football it's like 85% of that.
Yeah, I didn't look at Ohio State's total revenue or conference payout or total payout. I just know that FSU's athletics brought in 160 plus million, but 40 something of that was donors. So the Knight website gives you a really good breakdown of where the money comes from.
This article was printed by Sports Illustrated just a couple months ago, and it says, well, the top 10 according to, and this is college football revenue, is Oklahoma's at number 10. And if this page will populate, Oklahoma's at 100. This is athletic revenue, even though I looked up college football.
Right.
Whatever the percentage is for college football out of total revenue, I got to think it's extremely, extremely high.
Right.
So
I think they say 80 to 85%.
Yeah.
Is the average.
Sports Illustrated has Oklahoma number 10, 177, Penn State 181 at number 9, Florida at number 8 at 190. Why they've got them behind. Texas A&M at number 7 at 193. LSU at number 6 at 199. Georgia at number 5 at 203. Michigan number 4 at 210. Alabama's number 3 at 214. Texas is number 2 at 239. And Ohio State's number 1 at 251.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing. So I agree with Tim on some points, but like he's saying, you've got to have hope as a, middle of the road, non-blue blood, traditional powerhouse. To get through it, it's going to be pretty difficult. The ACC, the math doesn't add up for FSU for me, for them to leave. The disadvantage they have versus what they would have to pay. I mean, unless they were able to win a court case down the road, I don't see how they can do that. And I watched an interview with North Carolina's president. He said the Magnificent Seven was not to figure out, that meeting was to figure out how to make more money, not break up the conference. He actually said they're not trying to break up the conference. So.
And so why would they have 10 or 7 schools that formed a partnership of sorts to make that point?
Yeah. It was the unequal revenue share from what I understand.
Yeah.
That was what they were trying to accomplish, was just to get uneven revenue share because it was not in their contract to have such. So I have no clue where this is going to shake out, Mark. Nobody really can predict it because one day a president or AD can say this, and then the next day they change their mind. We've seen it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to put on my gypsy jewelry and break out my crystal ball. So
Yeah, that's like me making a projection on how competitive the Big 12 is going to be on the national landscape in the next 10 years. I could be completely wrong. Something could change. I don't mean that they should give up and not, send a team or two to the college football playoff every year. Utah is arguably, and I don't think it's a great argument, I think it's on Utah's side, the best football playing program as it stands right now that's going to be in the Big 12 in 2024. So, hey, line it up and send your team or two to the playoffs every year until proven otherwise that you can't compete.
right. And like Tim was saying, and what's the potential? I think every university is different when it comes to donors, and like he's saying, who's gonna supplement that. It's going to take so many different things. It's going to take a great head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, enough talent, a schedule that lines up, and you keep a healthy roster. There's going to be a million things that are going to have to line up for them to ever compete. Like we can say SEC, okay, last year, Ohio State loses. In my opinion, Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't go down. I think Ohio State wins that game. Okay. Mechie, was it Mechie the year before for Alabama? Yeah. Like literally Georgia, I can't say they weren't the best team because they won the games, but the two best receivers on each team went down, and that changed the entirety of the game.
And Alabama lost two. They didn't have their two start. Jamison Williams got hurt in the game. John Mechie was hurt before the game.
Right, which same Alabama had just beaten Georgia handily. So that's what I mean. You're gonna need some lucky breaks as far as your talent. You better have enough talent, and your stars better not get hurt, and to even have a chance. And then if you've got an opposing team, like Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, without those three guys, those teams are nowhere near what they're, without those guys, they drop major. So I think it's going to take a lot of factors for a mid team to get in there. As far as Utah goes, their donors it's kind of weird because their mass donors have been there. Now that they've opened up their collective, they're getting a lot of smaller money, but a lot of people doing it. So if you take 100,000 people pitching in $50 a year, that's a lot different than one guy giving, 5 million. So it's going to be interesting to see what programs can do going forward. And as far as the ACC, I'm so done with that, Mark, as a Utah Ute fan. I'm just so tired of realignment now that we're done and we're landed. And at least we hold on to a seat for now. I guess we're considering a seat. I'm okay with whatever the heck happens. I don't know where it's going to land.
If you and the Big 12 do not have a seat for regardless of what I just said about my forecast of competitive nature, then we are in big trouble. Like if we're going to, if we're going to have two conferences, wow. And we're going to be watching, 32, well, more than that, 40 schools play college football that really are competing for a national championship. Wow. It is going to be a major hit to the sport.
Right.
And it's going to be awful.
I mean, can we also go, you're going to leave out certain teams, but you're going to let Illinois, you're going to let Northwestern, you're going to let Kentucky, Vanderbilt. You know what what I'm trying to say there? Like, why are, there's relegation of teams that may be better, but why are they relegated? And like Tim said, it's because of where they're at.
They've earned their spot a long time ago. They've staked their claim and they're not budging, or we'll see.
Yeah. And it's because of your market. You're valuable because of this, not because of your program. Because has Texas in the CFP era with a top 10 roster every year, have they even sniffed the CFP?
No.
Okay. Have they had more money than everybody?
Yes.
talent. So, FSU, same situation, a lot of SEC teams. So,
well, at least those underachieving programs bring eyeballs and they bring resources and money. What does Indiana bring? They're just safeguarded because they have played in the Big Ten Conference forever.
right.
That's it.
Yeah. And how long are they going to stick around? Like, who brought it up? Who's to say in 2030 or 2036, they just don't start relegating teams in the conferences?
Yeah.
I mean, and they break off to the Big Two, just pick up the best teams, which we both know isn't going to happen. They're going to take the markets. They're going to take the eyeballs. That's what drives the sport. So anyway, I just thought I'd pop in for a minute and say hello and give my
It's
2
always good to
cents.
hear from you.
Yeah, good to
Larry.
hear from you guys.
Good stuff. Thanks,
All right,
Larry.
thanks, Mark.
Have a good day.
You too.
We'll keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We just ran down again. We don't know how accurate these numbers are. This is athletic revenue, of which football would account for most of it, 80 to 85%. And we saw Oklahoma at number 10 all the way down to Ohio State at number 1. Tony's dropping by to drop some knowledge on us. Hey, Tony.
Hey, just a quick clarification for anybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, sorry. My computer's been weird. Mark, you were quoting the profitability estimates that we used of sort of how profitable would football and basketball be if they were on their own, not the total revenue. You were talking about the profitability numbers. So before folks get like angry in the chat, I just figured I'd let you know that.
Yes, so explain that.
That's the calculation that we did for the deep dives of how profitable are football and basketball in terms of how much money do we estimate that football and basketball are throwing off to fund the rest of the whole department.
Okay. Yes.
So like if football and basketball were standalone from the rest of the athletic department, how much profit would be coming off of those? And in terms of Ohio State and Texas and everybody, it's huge. You get down to the ACC, it's a little less. You go to the MAC, and actually some of those are negative because like the MAC schools don't actually lose money on football. They don't even make money on football. So that was the number that you were talking about, was the profitability one.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. So that's minus all expenses and so forth.
Minus all expenses, and actually also adjusting for things like school subsidies and like transfer pricing of things like scholarships and stuff like that. So that's all that is like, so that's like, if you were to take the football department and say, this is a standalone thing, how profitable would it be?
Copy that.
There's a lot of money in the Big Ten and the SEC. And the wild thing, by the way, is, for example, if things don't work out with the Big 12 and Wazoo and the Beavs, they are going to face, massively significant revenue impacts, which is too bad.
Yeah.
And even with Stanford and Cal, I mean, Stanford has all the money in the world. Cal has all the money in the world. Effectively, they'll be fine. But they themselves are going to have to come up with more money because, for example, if they end up in the ACC, they're looking at $10 million a year more in travel. Now, in Cal's case, that would probably be paid by UCLA under their alimony deal. But it's going to be a lot of money. So anyway, I just figured I'd let you know.
No, I appreciate the clarification, Tony. Thank you for that.
No worries. Talk to you. You got other folks waiting. I don't want to keep you.
Good stuff from Tony Altamore. So again, the men's and women and the men's basketball and football numbers that I gave, it was Ohio State 137, Texas 134. I was making a comparison to Florida State at around 51 million of profitability from the men's basketball and the football. And a little promo time here. We just dropped a video earlier today as a network update. Please check out the videos. And that one in particular that will give you a look at the Voice of College Football going into the 2023 season and all the shows and programs and everything that we've got available. And we've got some restructuring, some streamlining to do, and that we have accomplished. So please check out the network update. And of course, we always appreciate your contributions here to the Voice of College Football. And a lot of exciting things coming up, including we'll do our 24-hour live stream going into the season. We've got a post-game special next Friday night. So is there a game to have a post-game? No, there's not, but we are introducing all of our post-game hosts and shows on a live stream next Friday night here at the Voice of College Football, and so much more to get to. We've got a Big 12 channel and an SEC channel that I would love if everyone here, regardless of your loyalties and your allegiances, would subscribe to the SEC and the Big 12 channels that just launched this week. I'm going to drop those links in the chat. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Our guy David's here.
The man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers, the ever-changing world of college football, Mark Rogers. Wow. Earning your money right now with all that's going on, I'm sure. You know, well, that's how you have the palatial estate that you have in the Connecticut area. So that it keeps you on your toes, I'm sure. That being said, I was wondering, by the way, just warning to Larry Pilgrim about to Georgia fans, you're not allowed to bring up injuries. If you bring up injuries to Georgia fans on what helped decide national championships for you, they will cut you off. You are not allowed to bring that up. That's, they will demonetize you. They will, whatever. You're not allowed to bring up injuries. I was told that, everybody has injuries, never allowed to bring up injuries. Just warning you, Larry, having dealt with the Georgia fans, never allowed to bring up injuries. Can't do it.
It was always my thought, David, that if we are not allowed to bring up any of these things, whether they're bad bounces or injuries or officiating calls, we just have our college football channel here. We just scroll the scores because there's really nothing to discuss because that says everything right there.
Nothing to discuss. Yeah. Right.
So why talk about anything?
Yeah, and according to Georgia fans, they kept on telling me their starting tight end was just as important as Marvin Harrison Jr. I didn't even know that. I mean, but
well, he wasn't even their starting tight end. He was their backup tight end. He was their second guy, Darnell Washington. Yes.
Right. One of their fans tried to argue that he was just as important to Georgia's offense as Marvin Harrison was to Ohio State's, which I thought,
because he catches like 12 passes a season.
Right, but
yeah,
I digress. Well, let's talk about the issues of the day. By the way, I think that I talked to Tony and we were talking to Tim about maybe the lifeline for the Pac being the ACC. But I was asking them, what is an ACC without Clemson, Miami, and Florida State?
It's not much of one.
I mean, we're back to what I've said before. Once you lose your anchor programs or your programs that have really accomplished something on a national stage, I mean, these are the programs that move the needle. I mean, losing them is kind of,
it's going to be a carbon copy approach to what the Big 12's done. Just scarf up as many programs and territory as you possibly can just to solidify what you do and that you're going to be in existence.
Okay. Operative words, you're just going to be in existence. I mean, think of like when we rank the top 10 winningest programs in the history of college football, Mark, and you know the list, I'm sure, pretty well, because you've probably recited it over the years.
I think
where all those programs going to be? They're going to be in two. Yeah. Right. They're going to be in two conferences, Mark. They're going to be in two conferences, and that's it. And, all these other conferences are going to be playing for, well, maybe they'll be playing for the 12th seed or the 11th seed in the 12-team playoff. I don't know.
Well, they will
or
be
minor
receiving,
tier bowl games.
If the champions receive top seeds to these to the playoff going forward, they will be receiving top seeds. Correct?
Yeah. I mean,
we know that their champion's going to be guaranteed a spot and guaranteed a bye. So to me, that means you're going to receive one of the top 4 seeds.
Okay, winning the Big 12 in 2024 versus winning the SEC or the Big 10 in 2024, the way those conferences are going to be structured. I mean, come on.
But technically, let's say little changes between now and 2024, and let's say, since you are my guest right now, Ohio State wins the Big Ten championship, and Georgia wins the SEC championship, and Oklahoma State wins it, doesn't even matter. Fill in a blank. Utah wins the Big 12. They'll probably be the best program. Utah wins the Big 12 championship. Clemson wins the ACC, and there's nothing else. Well, those are going to be your top 4 seeds. So that Utah team is going to be a number 4 seed with a bye in the first round. So they will,
Right.
regardless of, they could be the 20th best team in the country, but they're going to have a conference championship. They're going to be a seed with a bye. Until
Wow.
somebody decides 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, okay, the SEC's won 6 national championships and the Big Ten's won 5, and they've won all the games. And I don't know if that's going to happen at some point. But as it stands right now, the Big 12 will still have its entries into the playoff.
Right. But it will be interesting once we take a 4 or 5 year sample size of that, how successful their entries are going to end up being in the playoff. So,
They're
you know,
not.
well, okay. Great job of foreshadowing there, Mark.
That's a video right there.
Yeah, that's
I could
true. That
play out like the first 5 12-team playoffs.
wow,
Say, this is my
that's right.
estimate on the teams and the wins and losses from each conference.
That's good off-season work there.
We can
by the
play
way.
that back in 5 years and see how close I am.
You get some clicks on that. Get some views on that. I bet.
I hope so.
By the way, what is the status of Florida State right now? I've not heard any update. Are they still, you know, a team
Florida
without
State,
a country, or a
Florida
conference?
State they've got their conference. They're not real happy with it. It's maybe much like some of the people that aren't happy living here, but they still choose to live here.
Right.
So
Yeah.
with Florida State, they have until August 15th. I believe the calendar is coming close. They have until August 15th to tell the ACC that they do not intend to be playing football with the ACC in 2024. So some
Okay.
people believe that they're actually going to make some kind of grand statement that they're pushing to get out of the conference that soon.
And then that means what for their future, though? I mean, that means, I mean, what I mean, because I had heard Big Ten as possible destination. I mean, what is the likelihood of that happening?
Okay, this is the best. So this is a simple explanation, and it's much more complicated than this. And if anyone
Sorry,
in the
I've been
chat
out of it for a few days, so
to
pardon
provide
me.
any of this, well,
Yeah.
this hasn't really changed. That there are a few possible paths to get out of the grant of rights. One would be simply paying your way out of it,
Mhm.
which is an estimated $600 million.
Oh wow, that's it.
That's it, just
Okay.
600 mil.
Sure.
To earn an extra 40 or 50 million in TV revenue to be, it just doesn't, the obviously doesn't add up. So 600 million, you cough that up. Or there's a clause in the grant of rights that says that the ACC must remain competitive
Mm-hmm.
with its other conference competition. So if some group of lawyers can somehow prove, and obviously they're going to go to the finances, that this league is no longer competitive because of the disparity in revenue, then I don't know if that, depending on your interpretation of being competitive, I think that's kind of a weak one right now, because unless you can tie the money to the wins and losses, I don't think you can do that right now.
Is Florida State that big of? You list all the revenue producers
Yeah.
amongst the programs, but I mean, as far as an overall sports program, I mean, I don't know how high they are, or if they're up
Okay,
there
I'm going to take a
with
stab in the
the
dark.
top
They're
boys. Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
like in the low teens.
Okay. Okay. I actually thought that's a little bit better than I thought, actually.
And
So,
again, I'm taking a stab in the dark, but
okay.
the issue with that is not only that you're in the low teens or the high 20s, but that just much like recruiting rankings and the level of competition and competitiveness on the football field, it drops considerably quickly.
Well,
Just looking at the revenue that we posted just with the athletic department, Ohio State's at number 1 at
yeah, I knew
251,
that.
and Oklahoma's number 10 at I don't remember what the number was. It was like 160.
What was Texas one a few years ago? I always knew I always thought it was Ohio State and Texas usually in the top two.
Yes.
I think it's been that way for a while, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah. I would say this: adding Florida State to a program, I think their trajectory is maybe heading up. And maybe we take too much off of a decent season last year. I think some people are wondering if they're going to be overrated coming into this year and how well the Norvell era is going to play going forward. But as a program, I would not mind adding Florida State to the conference. What do you think, Mark? Do you think that's got to be a net positive for the conference and another feather in the cap?
Yeah. So the reason I'm the Big Ten and I add Florida State and Miami
Yeah,
is because of recruiting.
sure. Yeah, the footprint. Not that the Big Ten doesn't get into Florida. I mean, they do.
Yeah, one
But
school does.
well, okay.
Well,
No,
they
I mean,
all do,
right. I was going to say there's some other
but
schools
they're
that have
not
Florida.
competing for really good players. There's
Okay.
one school, Michigan doesn't even. Maybe they're just starting to. But if you look at the top 150 players in the state of Florida,
Yeah.
Ohio State's competing for the best, and nobody's in sight for. When you hear of Nebraska pulling a player out of Florida, he's the 112th rated player in the state of Florida.
Right.
Minnesota,
They're not getting
etc.
the top guys out of the
Yeah.
state. Yeah. Okay.
Again, Penn State and Michigan, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, they've yeah, because I know they've gotten recruits out of Florida in the past. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they've gotten, let's say, a top 20 player out of Florida in the past. And you know what, Team Up North, your largest fan base, I'm sure they'll put in the chat if I'm inaccurate on that one, Mark. So go ahead. But I mean, I guess one thing I would leave you on a final thought here with all this situation, and I'm trying to stay optimistic about it going forward. But just with the way that college football is changing and kind of morphing into the NFL, I guess the biggest takeaway for me is in a college football season where I'm used to maybe having 3 or 4 big games to root for with the Buckeyes, because when we play Bowling Green or Maction or whatever MAC team, Sacrificial Lamb, now there's at least 6, maybe 7 games on a schedule worth watching. So and what is the attraction of the NFL? The NFL week in and week out is a grind, period. In college football, if you're a blue blood and you get a MAC team or you get your weak sisters in the non-conference, that's like that's a sleeper. I mean, you're 42-0 by the end of the third quarter, and who cares? That's what the NFL. That's why the NFL is a 7-point league, and pretty much every game's decided by 1 possession or less, and it's so intriguing, as compared to college where you got a lot of blowouts. So
Yeah, what's intriguing about a college football Saturday afternoon is just finding the best games.
Right.
So we know the 3 or 4 best games, and those are going to be typically good games. Some of them will be blowouts, so let's say about half and half. But it's more about just kind of searching around and seeing on the bottom line, a game that you wouldn't even have considered wanting to watch, but you may check in for the final 5 minutes because Virginia Tech and North Carolina are 30-27 with 3 minutes left. But you're right. If there weren't so many games to choose from, that you can find the competitive games and hope that the Georgia Tennessee and the Georgia Alabama and the Ohio State Penn State and et cetera live up to the billing. Yeah, there's a lot of bad football or non-competitive football watching college football.
Well, it will make those Mark Rogers top 25s that make sense that much more enthralling because, as you are right to do, you put the emphasis on quality wins and what teams have accomplished on the field. We're going to have some teams have a lot of chances to prove on the field as we get, more intriguing games. I see in a world that's changed with college football. And again, I'm a traditionalist. I like the traditional. Maybe I'm doing a little silver linings playbook here, Mark. I'm trying to find it here. I'm trying to find it, going forward 2024 and beyond with this sport of something to look forward to. And that's obviously the biggest thing. So
for me, the takeaway, both positive and negative to all this chaos, is the negative for me is that the fabric of the sport is being ripped apart. The traditions, the rivalries,
Yeah.
I shouldn't even say the rivalries. Most of the rivalries are intact because they're
Sure.
played in the same conferences, but there are a number of rivalries that have been certainly thrown by the wayside. But it's more about the regionality. This sport,
Yeah.
more than any other sport, grew up as a regional sport,
That's right.
and it's losing that flavor. And like you say, you called it a poor man's NFL, basically, because we're going to have this kind of generic cross section of teams playing in conferences that have nothing to do with one another, except for at the very core,
Right.
Ohio State, Michigan State. But then all this is just, so we're going to have a basically AAA NFL.
Right. Yeah. It's morphing into, as I put, but like I said, conversely, you want to maybe a positive. There's more big games for your favorite team to look forward to over the course of a 12-game schedule than there would have been a few years back. So there's something with that.
Yeah. If you're like me, David, and you can certainly chime in to let us know how your viewing habits are.
Sure.
When I tune in Ohio State and Western Kentucky, that first game of the season, once it gets like 28-0, it's kind of like, okay, why am I watching this game? There are other better games on. And the more I do this, what I'm doing here, the more I drift away from my favorite team and watch what matters. And even most of the conference games. Shoot, Michigan's playing Penn State and Ohio State this year.
Right.
They may not play another competitive game. 2 games?
Yeah. It's a 2-game season,
Awful.
really. Yeah, that's true.
Awful.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, that Western Kentucky team, from what I hear, they can sling it around a little bit. They got a quarterback. They might come in and throw the ball around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So,
they will.
All right. As always, a pleasure to talk college football with you, my friend.
Thanks, David. Good to see you. Have a good night.
Take care.
Yes, sir. The changing landscape of college football. So just to get to the bottom of our original topic with Stanford and Cal, and the vote on Friday was, but it's close. They need 12 out of 15. They received 11 out of 15, with the dissenters being Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, and NC State. I find it curious that NC State voted to keep out Stanford and Cal, not necessarily having a true landing spot unless they would run to the Big 12. And I'm also curious that one of the yes votes to bringing in Stanford and Cal, which would solidify the ACC to a certain extent, is Miami. That they want to keep that current ACC structure together rather than taking their chances on, hey, Big 10, hey, SEC, we're Miami. We want to play some football in a bigger and better conference. Interesting stuff. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. We've left links to the Big 12 and the SEC channels in the chat. And here's the deal. I understand many of you don't care about the SEC or the Big 12, or you only like particular teams and don't want to wade through the rest of it. Our ultimate mission is to continue to expand and deliver really good channels, but it's better to be consolidated and strong than it is just to throw channels out there at a whim. YouTube will allow me to, and anyone else to a certain extent, to make up channels every day. We could just start Purdue channel, Utah channel, shoot. We can start the San Diego State channel, the Georgia Southern channel. We could do that all day. They would be awful. Because I'm one guy and I'm getting a lot of help from a lot of great people, but basically in terms of being here every day, churning it out, one guy. So we want our channels to be strong. Check out the video that we posted today on the network update. We've got 18 post-game shows headed your way. There are a few teams that are obviously absent from the post-game list as it stands right now. So if you are capable, meaning you can talk football, you know your team, you're going to be reliable. We need an Ohio State post-game show. Would love to have an LSU post-game show. Really, any of the powers from the SEC or the Big Ten. Really, anybody in the Power Five that we don't currently have, we would take them on. We would find a place for you and your post-game show right here at the Voice of College Football. Keep it locked in. Subscribe. Hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. And we will see you all very soon. And the next show scheduled is Trojan Conquest Live over on the USC channel with Tim and Rick on Sunday night. Otherwise, I'll see you at the Big Ten Live show here at 6 p.m. No. Actually, we will see you, if I don't jump on at any point on Sunday, we will see you Monday at noon. Monday at noon, I'm going to put up a banner. Since we got, 150 people here, 180 people, let's throw up a banner, because here's the deal. Monday at noon, we're going live because the AP poll is released. So the AP poll is released Monday at noon Eastern time. We will be here for it, and we will have a whole lot of fun dissecting the AP poll, the fallacies in it, and the teams that will not finish in the AP poll. Keep this in mind, that year to year, about 8 to 9 teams that start in the preseason top 25 in the AP poll do not finish there. So we got to find 8 or 9 teams that are, last year, 13 didn't make it to the end. All right. Appreciate you being here. Again, we'll join you on Monday at noon Eastern time, if not sooner, but Monday at noon Eastern time right here at the Voice of College Football for the AP poll release. See you then.